Chapter 996 Sneaking in 1. How could there be a person as violent as him? One's ability to utilize poison had always been used to determine one's standing in the poison hall, so naturally, the duels conducted were usually centered around the utilization of poison as well. Yet, the fellow before them actually sent them flying with his fists and kicks without any hesitation. How could there be a person as violent as him? Poison Master Sun, you are really too reckless. Upon recovering from his daze, Li Yuan suddenly recalled a matter, and his complexion darkened. They are the subordinates of Senior Duan Ren, so if you were to injure them, the latter will surely be displeased. Indeed. Senior Duan has always been biased towards those whom he was close with, and he has an explosive temper as well. Those who have offended him never ended well. Another young man added with an awful look on his face. Had Poison Master Sun held himself back, the most that could have happened was for him to be poisoned for a brief moment, and the matter could have passed just like that. Yet, Poison Master Sun actually beat the other party up to such a state. Senior Duan was bound to be displeased. If Senior Duan were to exact vengeance for his brothers, who could possibly stop him? Senior Duan? Seeing how frightened the young men were, Zhongxian couldn't help but ask curiously. Senior Duan Ren is Vice Hall Master Ming Zhen's direct disciple, and he is a 6-star poison master possessing the cultivation of Saint Wundan advanced stage. He is considered the strongest poison master in his generation, and all of us have to address him respectfully as our senior. Liu Shu, whom you have just beat up, is his most loyal subordinate. Li Yuan hurriedly explained. The hall master and the elders were the most senior generation in the poison hall at the moment, and their disciples and students were all considered to be in the second generation. But despite being in the same generation, Duan Ren was leading far in front of the others, to a point where the others could only look on in admiration. A Saint Wundan advanced stage 6-star poison master? Is he going to take it out on me just because of a subordinate? Seeing how frightened the others were, Zhongxian shook his head. No matter how unreasonable the other party may be, surely he had to at least give some respect to Elder Shu. Elder Shu was amongst the most senior generation in the poison hall, and he was Elder Shu's savior. Duan Ren might be arrogant, but as a junior, surely he wouldn't risk getting on Elder Shu's bad side just over a mere subordinate. Poison Master Sun, I am really not exaggerating the matter. There was one incident in the past where Liu Shu had acted disrespectfully to Senior Wu Haiyuan, so Senior Wu Haiyuan taught him a lesson. Upon learning of the matter, Senior Duan flew into a rage and poisoned him mute. Even to this day, Senior Wu Haiyuan is still unable to utter a single word. With a tearful face, Li Yuan hurriedly explained. Senior Wu Haiyuan is a 6-star poison master, and his cultivation has reached a staggering Saint Wundan. There's such a matter. Zhongxian was bewildered. With a doubtful look, he asked, to offend a fellow 6-star poison master over a mere subordinate, isn't that very reckless of him? It was no wonder why Zhongxian found it hard to believe this matter. He had taken a look at Liu Shu earlier, and the latter was only a transcendent mortal 8-dan ethereal treading realm cultivator. Most likely, he was only a 5-star poison master as well. There were plenty of those who could rival him easily in the poison hall, so it shouldn't be too difficult to find another person to replace Liu Shu as his subordinate. To offend a fellow 6-star poison master over this fellow. Wasn't Senior Duan needlessly bringing himself enemies for no good reason? Hearing those words, Li Yuan hesitated for a moment, and eventually, gritting his teeth tightly, he said, as a newcomer, it is not surprising that you are unaware of it, but Liu Shu isn't just Senior Duan's subordinate. He is also Senior Duan Gigolo. Gigolo? Zhongxian was perplexed. Senior Duan is a lady. Gigolo referred to men who were financially supported by a woman to become her escort. Could it be that the Duan Ren person they had been talking about all along was a lady? The other party had been addressing Duan Ren with he all along, so he had assumed that Duan Ren was a male. Perhaps he might have just misheard him. Nevertheless, considering how ugly Liu Shu was, just how bad could that Duan Ren's eyesight be? Senior Duan Ren is a male. Li Yuan said with an incredibly awkward expression on his face. Due to consuming too much poison, his sexual orientation has changed as well. Cough cough. Zhongxian choked on his saliva. He could have never thought that Duan Ren was a homosexual. However, thinking about it once more, it wasn't really too surprising. Poison masters spent their days alongside poison, and to concoct potent poisons, they might sometimes opt to try the poisons out of themselves. Putting aside changing one's sexual orientation, it wouldn't be impossible for one to fall in love with spirit beasts, saint beasts, trees, or even rocks and plants. Also, there were poisons which could induce hallucinations. Even though Liu Shu looked incredibly ugly to him, there was no saying that the other party might be a huge beauty in Senior Duan's eyes. That's right. Such situations aren't too uncommon here. Senior Duan will surely fly into a rage if he were to learn that you have beat his gigolo up. If he were to come and get even with you, that will be a huge disaster, Li Yuan said worriedly. There was no one in the poison hall who was unaware of how fearsome Senior Duan was. This was precisely the reason why no one dared to offend him. Yet, this fellow actually beat Liu Shu up to such a state without any warning. There was no way to resolve the conflict peacefully anymore. Even though Elder Shu could be considered to be a senior to Senior Duan, he was also only a 6-star poison master, so there wasn't too huge of a gap between their standings. Furthermore, the latter could very well become an elder if he could advance his capability a step further, thus putting the both of them on equal standings. If he wishes to come for me, so be it. Stretching his back lazily, Zhongxian replied leisurely. What Senior Duan or something, he couldn't care less about it. If the other party intended to cause him trouble, he didn't mind releasing the Violet Leaf King and stirring up a huge mess within the Poison Hall. In any case, he had already found the Poison Hall, and the Compendium Hall was located just a short walk away. There was no need for him to pretend to be a Samaritan to a bunch of fellows who only thought about poisoning others every single day. But, seeing how laid-back Zhongxian was, Li Yuan and the others glanced at one another and smiled bitterly. They were at a complete loss as to what to do. At that moment, a young man with an incredibly awful look on his face walked over with widened strides. Upon seeing the young man, the faces of Li Yuan and the others immediately warped in fear. Senior Duan. Speak of the devil. The accommodation prepared for Zhongxian might be peaceful, but there were still quite a handful of men in the vicinity when Poison Master Sun sent Liu Shu flying with a punch. News spread swiftly, and it didn't take long for Senior Duan Ren to learn of it and rush over. Doomed. It was already too late to escape at this point. Who? Swiftly walking forward, Senior Duan Ren leaped up and carried Liu Shu down from the tree branch. He carefully fed the latter some pills with a frighteningly chilling look on his face. Senior Duan, I challenged that fellow to a poison duel, but he assaulted me instead. I beg of you to redress my grievance. Upon coming to, Liu Shu raised his finger and pointed it at Zhongxian with gritted teeth. Don't worry. With narrowed eyes, Duan Ren stood up and glared at Zhongxian coldly, the killing intent in his eyes flaring furiously. I will make him pay the price. Senior Duan, Poison Master Sun over here is Elder Shu's savior. Seeing that the situation was heading down a very dangerous path, Li Yuan clenched his jaws in determination before hurrying forward to explain. Elder Shu had entrusted the other party to them, so they had to take care of him well. If the other party were to be poisoned to death right after arriving at the accommodation, they would have to take responsibility for his mishap as well. Scram! Duan Ren roared furiously. Deng 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 deng. A powerful shock wave surged forth from Duan Ren. Li Yuan's face paled, and he was knocked back 8 steps before spurting a mouthful of blood. Possessing only the cultivation of ethereal treading realm, he was completely no match for a Saint Realm expert like the other party. I don't care how you are related to Elder Shu or anyone else. Anyone who dares to hurt my man has to pay the price. Duan Ren stomped forward and glared at Zhongxian with wintry eyes. I will give you 2 choices now. You can either kneel down and apologize to Liu Shu right now, and allow him to do whatever he wants to do to you, or I will make a move personally and show you what a living hell looks like. There was no one who didn't know that Liu Shu was his gigolo, and yet, this fellow still dared to lay his hands on his man. This was a blatant disregard for him. If he didn't teach the other party a lesson, how was he going to establish his authority within the Poison Hall? Interesting. What if I choose neither of them? Zhongxian said with a wry smile. It was no wonder why Elder Shu said that the poison hall wasn't peaceful and told him to be careful. From the looks of it now, that was indeed the case. There were simply far too many fools who overestimated themselves here. He was planning to keep a low profile here, but looking at the other party's punch-seeking face, it seemed like he would be letting himself down if he didn't give it a good one. Choose neither of them. You are seeking death. With a fearsome roar, Duan Ren leaped forward, and with swiftness reminiscent of a streak of lightning, he appeared before Zhongxian at the very next instant. Clenching his fingers into claws, Duan Ren swiped at the middle-aged man before him. A powerful surge of zhenqi burst from his fingertips. At the same time, a unique powder cloaked the air before him. This powder was a lethal poison which he had spent great effort developing and concocting. Even a Saint One Dan pinnacle expert would succumb just by coming into contact with a tinge of it. Facing the other party's surge of zhenqi and poison powder, Zhongxian shook his head with a pitying look in his eyes. He raised his palm and sent a direct slap towards the other party, not even bothering to utilize any battle technique at all. Facing Zhongxian's attack, Duan Ren sneered in disdain. However, in the next moment, his eyes abruptly narrowed in astonishment, and he hurriedly gathered the full strength in his body into his hands to block the seemingly simple slap. However, he was too late. Just like Liu Shu, before he could even let out a scream of agony, he fell atop one of the tree branches and fainted. Zhongxian's current cultivation might only be nascent Saint Pinnacle, but not even the Saint Tu Dan Liao Song was a match for him. For this Duan Ren guy, a mere Saint One Dan advanced stage, to challenge him, the other party was truly seeking death. It would take nothing more than a mere snap of fingers for HM to destroy the other party. The faces of Li Yuan and the others paled, and their bodies began shivering. This was way too frightening. They were well aware of Senior Duan Ren's strength, having witnessed it themselves. Paired with his poison, not even a Saint Tu Dan primary stage cultivator would dare to fight him face-on. Yet, this poison master son actually knocked Senior Duan Ren out with a single slap. Just how powerful could he be? Alright, I will be heading in to rest now. Couldn't be bothered to explain the matter to the others, Zhongxian waved his hand before shooting a glance at Li Yuan. If anyone still wants to provoke me, make sure to report it to me beforehand. Leaving those words behind, he stepped into the residence. Yes. With twitching lips, Li Yuan and the others quickly nodded. After entering the residence, Zhongxian closed the door and swiftly located the area where spiritual energy seemed to converge towards before taking a seat. Since I am already at the Poison Hall, I should quickly finish reading the books and find a way to save Wei Ruyan. This matter mustn't be stalled for any longer. Even though he had stabilized Wei Ruyan's condition for the time being, every second wasted meant an additional second of danger for her. Since it was the Poison Hall that he was in, there was no need for him to bother about the rules of the Master-Teacher Pavilion. The important matter at hand was to swiftly finish reading those books and analyze a plausible solution to treating Wei Ruyan. With a thought, Zhongxian's soul slipped out from his body. He wouldn't be allowed to access the books in the Compendium Hall until he took the Poison Master examination, so there was no way he could march there in his body openly. In any case, it was equally efficient for him to read in his soul form as well, so there was no need to delay this matter any further. With a slight movement, Zhongxian flew into the air. It was still the day, but as a practitioner of the Heaven's Path soul art, he was unaffected by the yang energy of the sun rays. On top of that, after sharing soul essence with Wei Ruyan's soul, his soul had gained a certain immunity to poison. As such, the myriad of poisonous gases lingering around the island was completely ineffective towards him. After flying up to a decent altitude, Zhongxian lowered his gaze to get a bird's-eye view of the entire city. Elder Shu said that the Compendium Hall is one of the 3 great halls of the Poison Hall. Naturally, it should be the highest and grandest building here. Sweeping his surroundings with the eye of insight, Zhongxian soon caught sight of 3 particularly towering halls in the area. Chapter 997. Sneaking in 2. The 3 halls were around 70 meters tall each, and they towered above the other buildings in the area, making them particularly conspicuous. Poison Experimentation Hall, Sparring Hall, and Compendium Hall. The first two are areas where poisons are frequently utilized, so no matter how they are cleaned, there are bound to be traces left behind. As for the compendium hall, considering that it is a location where books are stored, the usage of poisons should be restricted there. The poison experimentation hall was a ground for poison masters to practice the concoction of poison. It was inevitable that there would be lingering traces of poison even if one were to attempt to neutralize it with the corresponding antidotes. The same applied for the sparring hall as well. As poison masters clashed with one another, it was inevitable that poison would be spilled in the surroundings, leaving behind many unerasable scars on the building. Using this as a gauge, it shouldn't be too difficult to determine which was the compendium pavilion. With such thoughts in mind, Zhongxian began to examine the three great halls carefully. Under the sharp glint of his eye of insight, the interiors of the three halls appeared clearly before his eyes. Indeed, two of the halls felt incredibly turbid, as if they were plagued with poison. That should be the compendium hall then. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. Without any hesitation, he immediately began heading to the cleanest hall of the three. The building was even taller than the other two, and the old scent of books seemed to linger around the building. There was a particularly powerful formation set up around it, making it difficult for anyone to enter without the possession of an artifact to bypass it. Upon seeing the formation, Zhongxian chuckled softly. His current proficiency of formations was already on par with 7-star formation masters, and he possessed the eye of insight on top of that. Finding a flaw in the formation around the compendium hall to slip through it was an extremely easy task for him. With sharp eyes, Zhongxian examined the formation, and a moment later, he found a small gap in the formation. He swiftly slipped through it. While a soul was formless and intangible, making it impossible to perceive it with one's eyes or touch, it could disrupt the flow of spiritual energy in the air, thus betraying its presence. The interior of the formation happened to be rich in spiritual energy, which meant that Zhongxian would still have to proceed carefully within the formation. Advancing forward through exploiting the flaws of the formation, it didn't take long for Zhongxian to arrive right before the entrance of the compendium hall. There were two Saint Wandan poison masters keeping guard. Zhongxian quickly calculated an ideal route to take before sneaking past the both of them discreetly and slipping into the compendium hall through the gaps in the door. The first floor of the compendium hall was filled with many bookshelves with innumerable books shelved on top of them. Taking a swift glance, they were all regarding poison. Deciphering the Way of Poison, Qing Yuan's 36 Art of Poison, Neutralizing Poison Walkthrough, Fundamental Theories to Poison Cultivation. All kinds of books relating to poison could be seen placed all around the area, creating an amazing collection. These were the blood and sweat of innumerable poison masters ever since the establishment of this poison hall branch 10,000 years ago. They were intermixed with both the correct and wrong interpretation of poison. To others, they would dare not read all of them recklessly for fear that they might end up confusing themselves. However, such a problem didn't exist for Zhongxian. Sweeping his gaze across the room, Zhongxian swiftly found himself a comfortable position. All right, time to begin. With such a thought in mind, Zhongxian began sweeping through rows of books with his sharp eyes. Hualala. Book after book was collected into the Library of Heaven's Path. Through compiling them together, a flawless Heaven's Path poison art was gradually being formed. 2 hours later, all of the books on the first level had been swiped clean. This is the 1-star Heaven's Path poison art. Zhongxian took a glance at the compiled book in the Library of Heaven's Path before withdrawing his consciousness out and headed towards the second floor. The layout of the compendium hall was similar to the libraries in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Each floor corresponded to a star each, and if one's rank hadn't reached the required level, one would be forbidden from accessing the floor. While Zhongxian had already compiled the 1-star and 2-star Heaven's Path poison art back at the Red Lotus Mountain Ridge Poison Hall, the collection of books here was clearly much greater and more varied. Since he was already at the Poison Hall, it would be best to collect all of them. He wasn't in a rush for time anyway. Besides, there was no saying that the method to saving Wei Ruyan would be contained in these seemingly unimportant books. As such, he dared not to get careless. Soon, he finished taking in everything in the second floor. After which, he moved on to the third floor. While Zhongxian's soul slipped into the compendium library to browse through its books, A huge ruckus had broken out in the residence where his physical body was seated. Staring at the tree where Senior Duan hung, many poison masters trembled in fear. They had thought that the newly arrived guest would end up being silently oppressed, but who could have thought that he was actually a rampaging dragon that devastated any who dared to provoke it. With just a single move, he had knocked out the strongest Senior Duan Ren amongst them. "Hurry up and report this to Vice Hall Master Ming," someone amongst the crowd shouted. "All right," a poison master replied before heading anxiously in a certain direction. Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan was a 7-star poison master, as well as Senior Duan Ren's teacher. The reason why Senior Duan Ren was able to get away with acting so arrogantly in the poison hall was due to his backing. For Senior Duan Ren to be pummeled by a newly arrived fellow, without a doubt, Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan would surely fly into a terrible rage. Rushing over, it didn't take long for the poison master to arrive at Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan's residence. He tried to enter it, but someone blocked him at the entrance. Vice Hall Master Ming is currently in a conference with the other elders. If you have something important to report, tell me and I will relay it to him instead. The guard spoke nonchalantly. Vice Hall Master Ming is in a conference. Frowning, the poison master hesitated for a moment before he eventually made up his mind and reported, "Someone has pummeled and knocked out Senior Duan Ren. Someone has pummeled and knocked out Senior Duan Ren." The guard was taken aback by the abrupt news. "Yes. The assailant goes by the name of Sun Qiong, and he is a guest whom Elder Shu has brought in." The poison master revealed everything he knew, not daring to hide anything. "All right, I got it. I will report it to Vice Hall Master Ming right now." The guard knew that Senior Duan Ren was a disciple which Hall Master Ming Zhan valued greatly and had high expectations of. In fact, the latter had been considering the matter of promoting Senior Duan Ren to become an elder of the Poison Hall as well, and it was likely that the motion would be proposed in the near future. Not daring to hesitate in the least, the guard hurriedly rushed in. A moment later, he returned and beckoned the poison master in. "Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan invites you in." Nodding, the poison master headed in. Not too long later, he arrived at the main hall. Upon seeing the impressive lineup within, he couldn't help but cower in fear. Within the room wasn't just Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan but the other 2 Vice Hall Masters too, as well as all of the 6-star pinnacle elders of the Poison Hall, with the exception of Elder Shu and Elder Shui. What happened? Upon seeing the poison master enter the room, Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan turned his authoritative gaze upon him and asked. Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan was a white-bearded old man who looked like he was in his 60s. His black robe, paired with his sharp and chilling face, granted him a powerful presence which induced others to cower before him. "The matter is like this." The poison master swiftly explained everything that he had seen earlier. "You are saying that the guest whom Shu Yu brought in has willfully injured Duan Ren?" Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan's eyes narrowed in suppressed fury. "Yes." The poison master nodded fearfully. "Very well. I have no idea where that lad came from, but how dare he cause trouble in the Poison Hall?" With a chilling glint in his eyes, Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan laughed coldly. "Bring me over. I want to meet the audacious man who dared to make a move against my student." "Yes." Not daring to hesitate, the poison master hurriedly led the way. "Vice Hall Master Ming, since we are free at the moment, why don't we accompany you there as well?" "Indeed. Normally, guests at our Poison Hall would be so nervous as to dare not utter a single word at all, yet, this fellow actually dared to make a move on our men. I sure would like to meet this amazing figure too." The remaining 2 Vice Hall Masters stood up simultaneously as well. "We are also interested in meeting the person whom Shu Yu has brought back from his trip. How can I miss a matter as interesting as this?" The remaining 20 elders smiled with an interested gleam in their eyes. After spending so many years on this island, rarely were there any matters that could interest the poison masters. Thus, upon hearing that an arrogant guest had visited their poison hall, they were eager to catch the drama that would unfold very soon. "Fine by me." Seeing that the 2 Vice Hall Masters and the other elders wanted to tag along as well, Vice Hall Master Ming waved his hand casually before following the poison master, heading for Zhongxian's residence. It didn't take him long to arrive at his destination. There, he saw his student and a few subordinates being hung pitifully atop a tree. Seemingly having suffered a heavy blow, his student had quite a few bones shattered, and his injuries were extremely severe. Damn it! With a livid face, Vice Hall Master Ming Zhen clenched his fists tightly together. The other party clearly knew that Duan Ren was his student, and yet, the other party still chose to deal Duan Ren such a vicious strike. This was a huge insult towards him as well. Open the doors! Vice Hall Master Ming Zhen beckoned for one of the elders to take care of Duan Ren before heading over to the residence door and harumphing coldly. Vice Hall Master Ming. Poison Master Sun said that. Upon seeing the sudden arrival of so many Vice Hall Masters and elders, Li Yuan and the others were scared speechless. With quivering lips, Li Yuan tried to explain the matter to them. Do my words mean nothing to you? Vice Hall Master Ming's eyebrows shot up as he bellowed furiously. No. Of course not. Knowing that it would be unwise to challenge the authority of a Vice Hall Master, Li Yuan could only obediently open the doors for him. He was intending to head in to inform Poison Master Sun Qiong of the matter in advance, but from the looks of it now, it seemed like he wouldn't get an opportunity to do so. With a cold gaze, Vice Hall Master Minute stepped into the residence, and the two Vice Hall Masters and the other elders hurriedly followed him. They were interested to meet the person who dared to beat Duan Ren into the pitiful state he was in. After entering the residence, they soon saw a figure seated in the area which boasted the highest concentration of spiritual energy in the residence. His eyes were tightly shut, seemingly in the midst of his cultivation. You are Sun Qiong? Seeing how the other party was still in the mood to cultivate despite their arrival, Vice Hall Master Ming's turned so dark that it seemed like ink would seep out from it. After saying those words, he waited for a while, but the fellow in front him still refused to open his eyes, as if they were non-existent. Audacious. Do you know who I am? Not expecting that a Vice Hall Master like him would be snubbed so blatantly, Vice Hall Master Ming Zhen felt so furious that he could explode. No matter what, he was an esteemed 7-star Poison Master. It was one thing for the other party to not rise to his feet to welcome him, but to be unwilling to even open his eyes, the other party was inconceivably arrogant. With so many people entering his residence and all the shouting that had gone on, he didn't believe that the other party would be oblivious to his presence. If this was the level of awareness he had, he would have long died in this world. There was no way he could have survived this long. Who? Despite bellowing furiously, there was still no response from the other party. It was as if the person in front of him couldn't hear him at all. You! Raging with fury, Vice Hall Master Ming's face flushed crimson. He had seen plenty of arrogant individuals in his life, but he had never met one who dared to put on airs like that. 3 Vice Hall Masters and 20 elders, that was a lineup that consisted of nearly the entire top echelon of the Poison Hall. Yet, despite calling repeatedly, the other party continued to sit nonchalantly on the floor, not bothering to respond at all. Audacious. Do you think that you can do as you please just because you have Shu Yu's backing? Very well, I would like to see how Shu Yu can help you out of this situation today. Unable to tolerate this blatant disrespect any longer, Vice School Head Ming roared furiously as his zhenqi burst forth from him, ready to make a move. Ha ha ha, Vice Hall Master Ming. How can you dirty your own hands teaching a person of this caliber a lesson? Allow me. At this moment, a chuckle sounded in the room, and an elder stepped forward. Chapter 998 The Invincible Zhong Shen 1 Elder Huang? Upon seeing who the one speaking was, Vice Hall Master Ming hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. It was indeed beneath his standing as a 7-star Poison Master, an esteemed Vice Hall Master, to make a move against the guest of an elder. It would cast him under the suspicion of oppressing his juniors. As such, it would be best if Elder Huang was willing to make the move for him. Elder Huang's strength was not beneath Shu Yu's, reaching Saint Wundan pinnacle as well. At the same time, his comprehension of poison had also reached 6-star pinnacle. With such strength, it should be more than sufficient for him to teach this fellow a lesson. Upon receiving Vice Hall Master Ming's permission, Elder Huang stepped forward and glared at Sun Qiong with narrowed eyes. Your name is Sun Qiong, isn't it? To keep your eyes shut even in all of our presence, you are truly presumptuous. However, It is presumptuous individuals like you who tend to have early deaths. I will give you 3 seconds to kneel down and apologize to Vice Hall Master Ming, and I can consider sparing your life. Otherwise, don't blame me for getting nasty. 3 breaths later, the other party's eyes were still tightly shut, as if he was dead. I have already given you a chance, but you are the one who refused to grasp it. Very well, let's see whether you possess strength comparable to the arrogance you are putting up. With the other party ignoring him entirely, he seemed as if a clown speaking to himself in a mirror. Enraged, he raised his palm and struck it towards Zhongxian. Boom! An overwhelming surge of zhenqi burst forth from his fingers, and innumerable poison bits immediately shrouded the middle-aged man before him as if falling flower petals. Tzzzzzzzzzz. Before the poison bits could even come into contact with the middle-aged man, the flowers and plants in the courtyard had already begun to wither, turning as black as charcoal. That is a smile of liberation powder? An elder exclaimed in astonishment. A smile of liberation powder was a poison specially concocted by Elder Huang. Just by a whiff, even a Saint One Dan pinnacle expert would die within a smile. Due to the frightening potency of the poison, it was deeply feared even amongst the upper echelons of the poison hall. Not bad. Seeing that someone recognized the poison, Elder Huang nodded in glee. These poison bits were indeed his greatest masterpiece. Since the other party didn't know his place, he would just have to ingrain it deeply into him. Hualala. In just a few moments, the poison powder fell upon Sun Qiong's body, creating a layer of white flakes reminiscent of snow. A smile of liberation powder can seep into one's body through the skin, so it is futile to hold one's breath. With so much of it on him, that fellow is a goner. Not even the deities will be able to save him at this point. Upon seeing the sight, one of the elders shook his head and remarked, "Putting aside breathing in such a potent poison, even just a single flake falling on one could easily lead to fatality." Considering that Elder Huang had thrown so much of it at once and even infused it with his zhenqi, the poison should have already seeped into the middle-aged man's skin. At this point, it was already too late to save the other party. Wait a moment, something is wrong. Look. Just as the crowd was lamenting over the imminent tragic death of the middle-aged man before them, another elder suddenly pointed forward and exclaimed, "Why does it seem like nothing is happening to that fellow at all?" Hearing that question, everyone quickly turned their sights over. The person, who was seated cross-legged before them, was still in the same position as before, not moving in the least. His eyes were tightly shut, as if he was asleep. It was as if the smile of liberation poison powder cast by Elder Huang was completely ineffective against the person before his eyes. Typically speaking, right after being poisoned by a smile of liberation, a person's body will start to convulse, his lips will uncontrollably curl upwards. Yet, this fellow is still showing the same nonchalant expression as before, as if his face has stiffened up. Elder Huang, could it be that your poison has lost its effectiveness? Another elder couldn't help but ask. This. Hearing those words, Elder Huang hurriedly took a closer look at the other party. Even though the other party was completely motionless, as a 6-star pinnacle poison master, he could still easily discern whether the other party was poisoned or not. A radiant complexion paired with smooth and supple skin. Not only did the other party show no signs of being poisoned, it seemed as if the other party had consumed some kind of incredible tonic, nourishing his body further. The heck? Can't you at least squeeze out the slightest hint of being poisoned for me? At the very least, make your face redden a little. Otherwise, how am I to face my fellow peers in the room? It is no wonder why that fellow is so arrogant. He must have consumed the antidote beforehand. The more Elder Huang thought about it, the more furious he felt. Since he doesn't fear poison, let's see if a mere nascent saint like him will be able to fend off my rampaging might. Right after saying those words, he sent a powerful punch right towards Zhongxian. Elder Huang had no idea what kind of antidote the other party had consumed that actually rendered his smile of liberation futile, but it was likely that he would only embarrass himself further if he were to continue using poison. Since that was the case, he felt that it would be safer for him to use brute force instead. He had to let the other party learn the price of acting arrogant. Hong Long. The strength of a Saint 1 Dan pinnacle cultivator rampaged, and in an instant, a huge gust of wind was whipped up within the courtyard. The bluestone pavements on the ground creaked under the immense strain of his might, seemingly ready to shatter into innumerable pieces at any moment. "That fellow still isn't going to open his eyes," an elder exclaimed. Elder Huang was preparing his strongest technique, and the overwhelming zhenqi he exerted was so great that even his breathing had hastened, and yet, the target facing the attack, Sun Qiong, still refused to open his eyes. He remained motionless on the spot, not bothering to dodge or retaliate. Wasn't this going a little too far? Peng! The fist which commanded incomparable might fell upon Sun Qiong's face. Catcher! The sound of bones breaking echoed clearly within the room. Following which, everyone saw Elder Huang leaping backward furiously with his left arm clutching tightly onto his right arm. The unbearable pain in his arm left his face twitching uncontrollably, and tears glistened in his eyes. This. Everyone blinked their eyes in a daze, dumbfounded. Elder Huang had utilized his full strength to strike on the other party's face, and yet, without even scraping the other party's skin, his arm was broken instead. Was this for real? Was that fellow that thick-skinned? Damn it, I will rip you into pieces. Noticing everyone's bizarre gazes on him, Elder Huang felt so embarrassed that he could die. Roaring furiously, he drew out a sword and charged at the fellow before him. "Elder Huang, you mustn't get reckless." Upon seeing Elder Huang's actions, everyone was astonished. If that Sun Qiong fellow were to die under Elder Huang's poison, he could still justify it as having failed to control his poison properly. On the other hand, the drawing of his sword could be interpreted as an attempt to kill in the poison hall. If the deed was really done, there would be no backing out. Sila. Blinded by his rage, Elder Huang couldn't hear anyone's voice anymore. He hacked his sharp sword down upon the fellow seated before him furiously, intending to split the fellow before him into two. However, just as the sword was about to land, the other party suddenly raised his palm and struck upwards. Hong long long. The loud rumbling of thunder resounded deafeningly in the courtyard. Elder Huang's sword chi dissipated entirely under the immense momentum of the palm strike, and in the next moment, his head was struck down by a forceful might, sinking deep into his chest. Putong! Elder Huang's body fell lifelessly onto the ground, never to move again. What? Elder Huang was killed in a single palm strike? That strike didn't just neutralize Elder Huang's attack, it rebounded Elder Huang's strength back upon him. Is that fellow really just a nascent saint? Looking at the dead Elder Huang, everyone's body stiffened. That was an elder, a Saint 1 Dan pinnacle expert. He was an existence who boasted equivalent strength to them, and yet, he was actually killed in a single palm strike. Just how powerful could that palm be? He didn't even move the rest of his body at all, and his eyes had never opened at any point in time either. A quivering voice sounded amidst the group. Hearing those words, everyone suddenly recalled the situation back then, and it seemed like Sun Qiong had been seated on the floor all along, moving only his palms. And more importantly, his eyes had never opened at any point in time. In other words, the other party hadn't even got serious yet. It was a casual palm strike to the other party, and yet, it was sufficient to claim Elder Huang's life. There is something really uncanny about this fellow. Nevertheless, we can't allow him to get away scot-free for killing Elder Huang. Let's attack him together, don't let him escape. A person roared. In the next moment, the remaining 19 elders swiftly flitted through the courtyard, surrounding Zhong Xian tightly. The reason why they held themselves back a moment ago was because it would be unseemly for elders like them to make a move on the juniors, and there would be no way they could account for this matter to Elder Shu either. However, now that the other party had killed Elder Huang, there were no grounds for reconciliation anymore. Not even Elder Shu would be in a position to stop them anymore. Indeed, let's attack him together. I sure do want to see if he is able to withstand my Yama incapacitation powder. Huala. The 19 elders struck simultaneously, and in an instant, the courtyard was suddenly filled with all kinds of poisonous mist. Several poisonous bugs and snakes leaped furiously towards Zhong Xian, eager to sink their teeth into his flesh. With so many lethal poisons compounded together, even a Saint 2 Dan primary stage expert would find himself succumbing to the poison within seconds. Yet, when the mist finally scattered slightly, everyone was shocked to realize that the other party was still completely motionless, as if he couldn't even feel the poison around him. The antidote that fellow took is too potent. Our poisons are completely useless against him. Let's just make a move on him straight. I don't believe that he will be able to withstand the attacks from all 19 of us simultaneously. Someone amidst the group bellowed, and the others nodded in agreement. Despite having utilized all of their strongest poisons simultaneously, that fellow wasn't wounded in the slightest. There wasn't even the slightest hint of an anomaly on his face. This went to show that something was amiss. They had no idea how the other party managed to do it, but it seemed like poison was completely ineffective against him. Since that was the case, they had no choice but to settle it with violence. Boom, boom, boom. Right after hearing that bellow, the 19 elders charged straight for the middle-aged man seated at the middle. Feeling the overwhelming force that had gathered around him, the seated Sun Chong seemed to have finally sensed that his life was in danger. Standing up, his figure flitted as if a streak of lightning, swiftly diving amongst the group. Rather than nascent saint, the agility of his movements was more like that of a Saint 2 Dan expert. While threading nimbly amongst the many attacks headed for him, he retaliated with fists of his own as well. His punches seemed to be direct and straightforward, but for some reason, they seemed to be infused with some compelling force that prevented them from evading them. Peng 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 peng. Every single punch he launched would accurately strike an elder, sending the latter flying away. The overwhelming strength that the other party exerted was far beyond what all of them combined could handle. On top of that, it wasn't just the other party's punch that they had to guard against. The other party's leg arts were formidable as well. His kicks were abrupt, swift, and precise, making it nigh impossible to guard against it. His eyes. His eyes are still closed. The longer the fight went on for, the more stifled the elders felt. 19 Saint 1 Dan pinnacle experts had encircled a nascent saint cultivator and attacked him simultaneously, and yet, not only did the other party manage to remain unharmed before their assault, they even realized that they were gradually being suppressed. And most importantly of all, the other party's eyes were still shut. It was as if the other party was sleepwalking. All of his actions and movements seemed to be instinctive, derived solely from his combat instinct. To be able to overwhelm the simultaneous assault of all 19 of them just by his combat instincts in itself. The elders felt as if they were going insane. The Vice Hall Masters watching the situation also couldn't help but gape at the inconceivable situation. We need to help them. The elders won't be able to hold on for much longer. One of the 3 Vice Hall Masters exclaimed. It was in consideration of their standing that they were unwilling to make a move earlier. After all, 4 7-star poison masters like them to lower themselves to deal with a measly nascent saint cultivator was truly unseemly. However, at this point, they realized that if they didn't make a move soon, the 19 elders could very well end up in the same state as Elder Huang. That would be a devastating blow to the poison hall. All right, let's go together. Vice Hall Master Ming Zhen's eyebrows shot up as he raised his palm and charged forward. Chapter 999 The Invincible Zhong Xian 2 Vice Hall Master Ming Zhen was a 7-star primary poison master, and he possessed a cultivation of Saint 2 Dan primary stage. Exerting his full might, an immense pressure fell from the heavens, crumbling the walls of the courtyard into dust. Seeing that Ming Zhen had made a move, the other 2 also stepped forward without any hesitation. Just like Ming Zhen, they were also Saint 2 Dan primary stage cultivators who possessed astounding fighting prowess. With the 3 experts collaborating with one another, an overwhelming force swept into the surroundings like a calamitous tide, destroying everything in its path. What is going on? Seeing the collapse of the courtyard walls and sensing the fearsome shockwave that lingered in the air as a result of the fighting, Li Yuan and the others, who were still standing guard outside at the moment, turned their eyes over, and upon taking a look, their faces began twitching uncontrollably. Wasn't Vice Hall Master Ming going to just get even with Poison Master Sun over this matter? Why would they suddenly start fighting like that? Not to mention for the 3 Vice Hall Masters and all of the elders to gang up against a mere nascent saint cultivator. Weren't they being a little too shameless? It seems like Elder Huang has died. A quivering voice sounded in the air. It was only after hearing the voice did Li Yuan notice that an old man was lying on the ground with his head sunk into his neck, as if someone had smacked it in with his palm. It was an extremely eerie and bone-chilling sight. Without a doubt, that was definitely a fatal blow. Most likely, they must have provoked Poison Master Sun, and out of anger, the latter ended up doing this. Li Yuan's heart jolted in fear as he continued staring intently at the situation. With the 3 Saint Tu Dan Vice Hall Masters joining the fray, the tables seemed to have been turned. Having to fend off more than 22 experts simultaneously, Poison Master Sun was placed under great pressure. With a forceful strike, Poison Master Sun knocked 2 of the elders who were engaging him at the moment before swiftly flicking both of his wrists. A spear appeared in his right hand and a sword appeared in his left. Hula! With a simple pierce, the spear whizzed across the room and appeared right before an elder. In the blink of an eye, the spear had already impaled the other party's throat. Under the immense force of the pierce, the lifeless body of the elder was sent flying out. Moving simultaneously along with the piercing spear, the sword in Zhong Xian's left hand moved in an elegant arc, and a sword chi harnessing the inviolable authority of the heavens abruptly burst forth. The elder who was standing to the left of Zhong Xian hadn't expected that he would be able to effectively utilize both weapons simultaneously. Before he could react, he suddenly felt a chilling sensation strike his neck. In the next moment, as his head rolled off its base, a fountain of blood spurted forth from the neck of the decapitated body. He is killing the elders. A chilling sensation abruptly assaulted Li Yuan and the others, and they began shivering involuntarily. Each of these elders was reminiscent of transcendental existences to them, mighty figures whom they could never hope to equal. Yet, at this moment, it was as if someone had torn the veil of mystery and grandeur shrouding them. Like any other mortals, they were bleeding and dying. That powerful impact from the sight left their throat tensing up, rendering it difficult for them to breathe. Doesn't it seem like, throughout the course of the entire battle, Poison Master Sun hasn't even opened his eyes once? Someone amongst the group suddenly exclaimed in astonishment. After hearing those words, it suddenly dawned on Li Yuan and the others that that was indeed the case. From the start of the battle until now, Poison Master Sun Qiong had his eyes tightly shut, seemingly only retaliating instinctively to whoever who was attacking him. Every spear that whizzed forth would have the throat of an elder in its path. Every single sword slash would send an elder into death's embrace. It was as if the other party was Yama himself, an unstoppable force which they couldn't hope to contain no matter how they struggled. In just a few moments, another 10 more elders were killed. This won't do. If this goes on, all of the elders will be killed by that fellow. Seeing the number of elders of the Poison Hall swiftly diminishing, Vice Hall Master Ming panicked. If this were to go on, in less than 10 breaths, every single elder in the Poison Hall could very well lose their lives here. To think that a nascent Saint Cultivator would be able to claim the upper hand while rivaling 22 Saint Realm experts simultaneously and even kill 10 of them consecutively. Just what kind of monster was he? All elders, listen to my command. Retreat to the backline. I, Vice Hall Master Ming, and Vice Hall Master Qian will deal with that fellow ourselves. Realizing the same, another Vice Hall Master commanded with an authoritative voice. As there were too many people involved in the fight earlier, and most of them were their close friends on top of that, they were unable to exert their full might as Saint Tu Dan cultivators for fear of harming them accidentally. What they had to do now was to have the other elders back out of the battle first so that the 3 of them could better collaborate with one another to kill the fellow before them. Yes. Upon hearing the command, the remaining elders heaved a sigh of relief. They hurriedly leaped out of the battle with fear reflected in their eyes. Honestly speaking, there was really something unsettling about that fellow. It was one thing for the other party to be impervious to their poisons, their greatest weapon, but how could the other party wield such frightening physical and Jinchi strength as well? It was as if he was a gargantuan monster packed in the form of a human, wielding inhuman might in every single one of his strikes. Despite so many of them teaming up against him, he was still able to emerge unscathed and even kill more than 10 of them so easily. Not to mention, from the start to the end, he had never opened his eyes at all. If he was already so powerful without his eyes, how frightening would he become when he opened them? If only they had known earlier, they would have never gotten involved in this matter. From the very start, this was a matter caused by the student of Vice Hall Master Ming. It had nothing to do with them, and they were supposed to be there as mere spectators. Right after the elders left, the three Vice Hall Masters swiftly surrounded Sun Qiong. Driving Zhenqi in their body to the limits, they launched powerful blows one after another towards the other party. Hualala. With the combined strength of 3 Saint Tudan cultivators acting against him, a powerful force sealed the space around Zhongxian tightly, effectively caging him in. Despite being trapped, Zhongxian showed no signs of faltering at all. On the contrary, he seemed to be getting more and more powerful as the fight went on. All of a sudden, with a piercing shrill, the spear in Zhongxian's right hand burst forth. Ding 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 ding, the spear tip struck the walls of the cage forcefully. In the blink of an eye, cracks began appearing on the stable wall of Zhenqi. Following right after, a sword sliced through the cracks in the wall. Voila! Just like that, the powerful Zhenqi spatial lock was sliced into two. Pu. 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 Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan and the others spurted fresh blood simultaneously as horror surfaced in their eyes. For a nascent saint cultivator to tear apart the Zhenqi spatial lock set up by 3 Saint Tudan experts so easily, the other party's strength had far exceeded their expectation. Furthermore, what was even more frightening was that the Zhenqi harnessed by the other party seemed to have no bound. Despite executing such powerful attacks multiple times within a short frame of time, the other party was still as vigorous as ever, as if those attacks hadn't depleted him in the least. Just how in the world did he do it? Trinity of heaven and earth formation. Bellowing anxiously, Vice Hall Master Ming swiftly flitted to the side and assumed a specific position. Hearing his words, the other two Vice Hall Masters nodded and swiftly got into their positions as well. Trinity of heaven and earth formation. This was a formation that could amplify their combined fighting prowess. As long as they were to use it well, even a Saint Tudan pinnacle expert would be no match for them. As soon as they got into position, their raging Zhenqi began connecting with one another, forming something reminiscent of a metal chain. Seemingly sensing a threat from their movements, Sun Qiong took a step back and kept the spear in his hand with a flick of his wrist. Even so, his eyes still didn't open. Go. TZZZZZZ. With the formation augmenting them, the aura of the three Vice Hall Masters surged. Drawing their swords, they flicked their wrists and sent innumerable surges of sword chi towards Zhongxian as they charged forward. However, before any of the sword chi could strike Sun Qiong, the latter abruptly leaped up and kicked thrice consecutively in the air. The 3 kicks didn't seem to have any particular rhythm to them, but yet, they landed accurately in their path of movement. With just this simple move, their collaborative offense was sent into disarray. He broke the trinity of heaven and earth formation. Upon seeing this sight, the surviving elders narrowed their eyes in astonishment. The 3 kicks might have seemed to be random and illogical, but they had destroyed the tempo of the trinity of heaven and earth formation, thus effectively nullifying it. To be able to overcome such a formidable formation with just a couple of kicks, could it be that the other party possessed a deep understanding of formations as well? It was one thing for the other party to be so powerful, but to have such a deep understanding of formations on top of that. How were they supposed to win against this freak? Not only would their formations be completely ineffective against the other party could even utilize formations against them as well. The situation was very disadvantageous to them. Puha! While the elders were still overwhelmed with shock, Sun Qiong, who was still surrounded by the 3 Vice Hall Masters, abruptly swept his sword forth, severing Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan's arm along with his entire shoulder. Blood immediately spurted frenziedly in the air. Arth! With a cry of agony, Vice Hall Master Ming Zhan hurriedly retreated backward with a pale face. At this point, he could no longer find the strength to fight on any longer. No matter how he thought about it, the situation was just inconceivable to him. How could the collaboration of 3 Saint Tudan experts fail to subdue a mere nascent saint cultivator? With the formation broken, there was no longer anything to fear from the trio anymore. Sun Qiong advanced towards the other 2 remaining Vice Hall Masters. With the sword in his hand, he rendered them completely incapable of retaliating, leaving them no choice but to retreat continuously. Wait a moment. Is it just me, or is Sun Qiong's offense always targeted towards the person who is attacking him at the present moment? As long as one were to stop his attack, he wouldn't pursue the other party any further. All of the sudden, an elder suddenly exclaimed. Now that you speak of it, that does seem to be the case. Another elder nodded in agreement. Thinking back, as powerful as Sun Qiong's fighting prowess was, he didn't just attack any of them randomly. Instead, it seemed like his attacks were only focused on whoever was attacking him. It was almost as if he was moving on reflex. Vice Hall Master Qian and Vice Hall Master Sun, stop attacking him. There is a very good chance that he will cool down once you stop your offense. Upon realizing this point, one of the elders hurriedly shouted over. Stop attacking him? Hearing that shout, the two Vice Hall Masters suddenly recalled the details of the battle and realized the same anomaly as well. With a frown, they leaped out from the area of battle. Hula! As soon as they leaped away, the other party, who was sending out innumerable lethal sword chi at them a moment ago, abruptly lowered his sword before keeping it with a flick of his wrist. Who? Following which, he sat down cross-legged on the floor once more, paying no heed to the huge crowd around him at all. Seeing that the other party had finally stopped his offense, the duo heaved a sigh of relief. As the tension finally left their body, they realized that they were completely soaked with cold sweat. Had it not been for that elder realizing the anomaly regarding the other party's attack, it would have just been a matter of time before they were killed. For a nascent saint to kill a dozen Saint 1 Dan pinnacle experts and corner 3 Saint 2 Dan experts to the point where they could hardly catch a breath. Where did Elder Shu find this monster from? It seems like he was in some kind of trance due to his cultivation. Rather than attacking us consciously, it is a reflex action from his body in response to danger. Vice Hall Master Qian remarked. Hearing the other party's explanation, everyone contemplated for a moment before nodding in agreement. There was some sense in what the other party had said. From the start to the end, Sun Qiong had been sitting there silently. It was only upon their offense that he was forced to retaliate. Furthermore, throughout the course of the battle, he only retaliated against those who were attacking him at that moment. Those who had attempted to claim his life ended up having their lives claimed by him instead. Thinking about it now, it seemed they had only survived the ordeal because they had held back in their attacks. If even his reflexes are so powerful, just how formidable will he be in a conscious state? An elder trembled in fear as he spoke. Everyone fell silent. Reflexes were the instinctive reactions of a body in the face of a certain stimulus. Actions made under such circumstances were devoid of consideration, so naturally, one's fighting prowess would be limited. Yet, under such a state, the other party was actually able to corner nearly all of the elders and vice hall masters of the Poison Hall. If that Sun Qiong fellow were to recover from his state of cultivation, wouldn't he become a huge threat to all of them? Who in the Poison Hall would be able to stop him? Quick, call Elder Shu over. Unable to stand it any longer, Vice Hall Master Qian commanded anxiously. It seems like Elder Shu has gone to meet the Hall Master. One of the elders replied. Call the Hall Master here as well then. Vice Hall Master Qian snapped. Gritting his teeth, he turned his gaze towards the dead elders by the side, and tears began streaming down his eyes. What the heck was this? When had their Poison Hall suffered such great grievances? Yama is the god of death for Buddhism and Hinduism. Chapter 1000. My precious. In the residence where the Hall Master resided, Elder Shu was seated by the side with a slight smile on his face. You are saying that it is due to a righteous poison master named Sun Qiong who saved you despite the dangers that you are able to return to the Poison Hall? An old man seated opposite to Elder Shu asked. With an appearance reminiscent of a person in his 60s or 70s, the old man had an amiable smile on his face. Had one not known better, it would have been impossible to imagine that this old man was actually the head of the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall, a 7-star poison master. That's right. That poison master Sun is a very righteous person, and he possesses both courage and wits. If not for him, I would have died just like Elder Shui. Elder Shu's eyes gleamed in admiration and respect as he spoke about Sun Qiong. To be able to save him from the hands of a Saint 4 Dan expert, the courage and wits that were required to do so was something that too few in the world possessed. For a nascent saint to be able to face an expert of that caliber straight without faltering, he is indeed a rare talent. All right, I shall approve of the matter. He will be given an opportunity to take the Poison Master examination to join our Poison Hall. The old man stroked his beard as he said with a smile. Thank you, Hall Master. Elder Shu hurriedly stood up and clasped his fist. With a look of confidence, he continued, rest assured, you won't regret the decision you made today. Poison Master Sun is definitely a trustworthy person whom we can leave our backs to. It is rare for you to offer such high compliments to someone. I will be looking forward to meeting Poison Master Sun then. The Hall Master nodded. Halfway through his words, a person suddenly rushed into the room while exclaiming, Hall Master, Elder Feng, what's wrong? Turning around, Elder Shu recognized the person to be a fellow elder of the Poison Hall, Feng Ping. However, the current Elder Feng was vastly different from how he was usually. His nose was crooked, his face was swollen, and his body was filled with many bloodstains. It was as if he had just undergone some kind of life-and-death situation. What's wrong? You still dare to ask me what's wrong? Upon seeing Elder Shu, Feng Ping suddenly felt immense rage coursing through his body. Roaring furiously, he charged at Elder Shu, seemingly wanting to tear the other party apart. Were it not for Shu Yu bringing that fellow here, would their Poison Hall suffer such tragic casualties today? Elder Feng, it is unseemly for an elder like you to make a move on your peers without any warning. Speak, what happened? The Hall Master bellowed with a frown. Hall Master. Upon hearing the bellow, Elder Feng hesitated for a moment before stopping. Clenching his jaws tightly together, he spoke indignantly, 14 elders of our Poison Hall have just been killed. The only ones surviving are me, Elder Du, and 4 others. Even Hall Master Ming had his entire arm severed at the shoulder, and he is still in a precarious state at the moment. What? 14 elders have just been killed? Hurry up and explain yourself. Shocked by the news, the Hall Master abruptly got to his feet and stared at Elder Feng with narrowed eyes. There were only a total of 22 elders in the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall. It was just a moment ago which he had just received news of Elder Shui's death, and in the blink of an eye, another 14 elders were killed. These elders should have been in the Poison Hall, and for them to be killed, could it be that they have been invaded by enemies? The culprit is the guest whom Elder Shu brought in, Sun Qiong. Elder Feng spat through gritted teeth. Sun Qiong? What happened? Astonished, Elder Shu staggered. This is what happened. Elder Feng swiftly explained everything that had happened, including how Du and Ren had challenged Sun Qiong, Vice Hall Master Ming flying into a rage, as well as how they encircled Sun Qiong, only to be killed themselves. How could this be? After hearing the explanation, Elder Shu suddenly felt the vision before him blacking out. I know that I said that those within the Poison Hall respect the strong, and you don't have to show any mercy to them. But you really don't have to go to the extent of killing 14 elders of the Poison Hall. It was just a moment ago that I said that you are a righteous and trustworthy person, and in the next moment, you caused me such a trouble. How do you expect me to face the other party like that? Let's go over and take a look. Shooting a cold glance at Elder Shu, the Hall Master flung his sleeves before hurriedly following Elder Feng out. Naturally, Elder Shu had no choice but to tag along. Not too long later, they arrived at the accommodation Elder Shu had prepared for Zhongxian, and it didn't take long for them to notice that the ground was filled with corpses. These men were Saint 1 Dan pinnacle experts, masters of poison. Outside, they could easily rival 3 to 4 ordinary Saint 1 Dan pinnacle cultivators easily, and yet, within just a few moments they had turned into cold corpses lying on the ground. Scanning the area, he soon caught sight of the culprit, Sun Qiong. The latter was still seated cross-legged on the ground, cultivating with his eyes tightly shut, as if he had nothing to do with the horror that had just occurred a moment ago. Elder Huang, Elder Li, Elder Liu. Looking at the corpses on the ground, the Hall Master felt a lump in his throat. Subconsciously, he clenched his trembling hands tightly into fists. These were the men who had accompanied him for several centuries of his life, and yet, within just a few moments, they were slaughtered clean by that fellow. More importantly, the culprit was still dared to cultivate fearlessly on the spot. Wasn't he snubbing their poison hall way too much? Hall Master, you must kill that fellow and avenge our brothers. Vice Hall Master Ming rushed forward and pleaded desperately. He had already had his arm bandaged, and he had consumed some recovery medicine to alleviate his condition as well. However, the injury he had sustained was simply too severe that it was impossible for him to make a full recovery. To put it in harsh words, he had been crippled. Hall Master, that fellow is simply too arrogant. He doesn't even bother to open his eyes when he fights us. It will be a calamity to the poison hall if we were to leave such an imperious fellow lurking amongst us. We must kill him. Otherwise, how can we face our dead brothers? This is a matter regarding the dignity of our poison hall. The other two vice hall masters and elders roared in agreement. As one of the most feared occupations on the master-teacher continent, others would flee in fright whenever they appeared. When had they suffered such grievance such as to have 14 of their elders killed by a fellow with his eyes closed? Don't worry. No one has ever gotten away scot-free after causing trouble in the poison hall. Waving his hand grandly, the hall master turned to Vice Hall Master Qian and instructed, "Apprehend Shuyu and have him imprisoned. After I deal with this fellow, I will interrogate him personally." Yes. Upon hearing the order, the elders hurriedly encircled Elder Shu to prevent him from escaping. Hall Master. Not expecting the situation to unfold in such a manner, Elder Shu exclaimed in panic. Yet, there was nothing he could do in this situation. There was no way he could explain himself. Back when Poison Master Sun accompanied him to the Poison Hall, the other party still seemed perfectly normal. Thinking back, the other party even promised him to keep a low profile. Yet, within the short span of time which he went to report something to the Hall Master, the other party actually killed 14 elders. Is this your definition of low profile? You are clearly not here to take the Poison Master examination but to wipe our Poison Hall off the face of the world. But as stifled as he was, Elder Shu knew that he owed his life to Poison Master Sunday. After a moment of hesitation, he still couldn't help but speak up. Hall Master, Poison Master Sun isn't the type of person to kill the innocent. There might be some kind of misunderstanding here. Seal his mouth, the Hall Master roared furiously. 14 elders of the Poison Hall had been killed, and Elder Shu still dared to play this matter off as a misunderstanding. If a misunderstanding could justify this matter, what else in the world couldn't be justified? Yes. Vice Hall Master Qian nodded before walking up to Elder Shu. With a tap of his finger, he sealed Elder Shu's ability to speak. Seeing that Elder Shu had been dealt with, the Hall Master finally turned his gaze back to the middle-aged man seated before him and spoke menacingly. Sun Qiong, is it? To dare to venture alone to the Poison Hall to cause trouble, I have to admit that you do have guts. However, regardless of who you are or what you are here for, since you are already here, you need not think about stepping out of here alive. Walking up to Zhong Xian, the Hall Master tapped his finger lightly, and a row of beetles, roughly around the size of a fingernail each, flew forth. There were exactly 9 of them. An old gold-color shell on their back and wings that reflected sunlight off its body, they had a particularly disconcerting appearance. Those are our Hall Master's dark gold venom beetles. These beetles contain a lethal poison which can kill even a Saint 3 Dan expert easily. Indeed. Our Hall Master had to pay a heavy price in order to nurture these dark gold venom beetles. Just counting the Saint herbs by itself, those beetles had already eaten more than 100 of them. But fortunately, his investment paid off. It was arduous and expensive, but he managed to nurture 9 of them. Each of these 9 bugs is able to poison a Saint 3 Dan expert to death individually. With the 9 of them gathered, even a Saint 4 Dan expert would have to flee in fear. To release all of them simultaneously, it seems like our Hall Master is truly in rage. That fellow is done for. Although I don't know what kind of antidotes he consumed to render all of our poisons ineffective, there is no way that it will be able to neutralize the dark gold venom beetles of our Hall Master. Upon seeing the Hall Master release his dark gold venom beetle, everyone's eyes lit up. Every single one of them had nurtured their own poisonous bug or snake at some point in time, but in terms of deadliness, there was none that could come close to comparing up to the Hall Master's dark gold venom beetle. Just a single one was sufficient to poison a Saint 3 Dan expert. It was no wonder why it would be an object of fear for many. Should the Hall Master intend to start a massacre, these 9 dark gold venom beetles could easily bring extinction upon the entire Hongyuan city. This was the frightening might of a 7-star poison master. In everyone's view, regardless of how potent the antidote Sun Qiong had consumed was, the most he could do was to neutralize their poison powder. In face of a poisonous bug as formidable as the dark gold venom beetle, there could only be one outcome: death. Woo! Forming a stark contrast to everyone's look of anticipation, however, was Elder Shu's panicked muffled shouting. However, with his ability to speak sealed, he wasn't able to say anything at all, so he could only cry anxiously by the side. Ignoring the looks of amazement from the crowd, the Hall Master flicked his finger grimly, and 9 droplets of blood flew forth. The 9 dark gold venom beetles swallowed a droplet each, and their colors grew even brighter. Go! With a furious bellow, the Hall Master pointed his finger towards Sun Qiong on the floor with killing intent seething in his eyes. Wung wung wung. Upon hearing the command, the 9 beetles flew forward, and in the blink of an eye, they were already right before Zhongxian. Seemingly unaware of the dangers lurking around him, Zhongxian remained seated in the ground with his eyes tightly shut, not moving in the least. Who? Seeing that the other party had no intentions of dodging, the Hall Master sneered coldly. He controlled the beetles remotely and had them land all over Zhongxian's body, be it his arm, neck, or legs, anywhere his skin was exposed. Catcher, catcher, catcher. The beetles bit down firmly, and venomous fluid flowed from the beetle's mouth into Zhongxian's body. They have bitten him. As soon as the dark gold venom beetle bites down on its target, venomous fluid will immediately flow from its mouth into the target's bloodstream, and within just 3 breaths, the target will meet his demise. To be bitten by all 9 beetles simultaneously, it will be a miracle if he can even survive a single breath. Everyone thought that the fellow would flee in fright after seeing the dark gold venom beetles, but who would have thought that he would remain seated on the floor, allowing the 9 beetles act as they pleased. With all 9 of the beetles biting him simultaneously, not even the deities could possibly be able to save him anymore. Who? Right after biting Zhongxian, the 9 dark gold venom beetles flew up once more. However, before they could get far, their heads suddenly slanted to the side, as if intoxicated. Pada, 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 following which, they abruptly fell to the grounds. Their legs twitched for a few moments before falling still altogether. Pu. The Hall Master's face paled, and blood spewed from his mouth. He staggered 8 steps back before falling weakly to the ground. Raising his gaze, he looked at his fallen beetles with a look of horror. My precious. Chapter 1001. How noisy. He had spent several centuries cultivating these 9 dark gold venom beetles, and he had spent an unimaginable wealth and fed it a vast amount of fresh blood before he could nurture them to maturity. In a sense, it was no joke to say that they were even more precious to him than his own son. And yet, in the blink of an eye, they had collapsed to the ground, not moving at all. It took all of the mental resilience he had to not go insane in that moment. Seeing the Hall Master and the dark gold venomous beetles' state, the surrounding crowd glanced at one another in bewilderment. Are those dark gold venomous beetles poisoned to death by Sun Qiong? That fellow actually carries an even more formidable poison than that of the beetles. While attempting to poison that fellow to death, they ended up being poisoned to death instead. After realizing what was going on, their faces warped in frenzy. Given their deep comprehension of poison, it didn't take too long for them to uncover the true reason behind the beetles' death. They were killed by an even formidable poison than the one they carried. From the start to the end, the beetles had only landed on Sun Qiong's body for a brief moment. Given so, no matter how inconceivable it was, there was only one possibility to the situation. The other party carried an even more fearsome poison in him. The other party had stood still for the beetles to bite him, but it ended up being the beetles who were the ones who died instead. The spectators couldn't help but feel frenzied by the sight. This was the Poison Hall, the ground where all of the top poison users of Hongyuan Empire, or even the entire Qingyuan Conferred Empire, were at. And yet, the precious poisonous beetles of the Hall Masters ended up being poisoned to death. It was truly a huge irony. "I will kill you," the Hall Master bellowed with utmost rage. At this moment, the Hall Master bore no semblance to the elegant and dignified old man he was before. His eyes had turned red in delirium, and it seemed like he would not rest until he ripped the fellow before his eyes apart. However, that was to be expected. The dark gold venom beetles were his life-bound venomous bugs, and their deaths didn't just signify that the staggering amount of resources he had devoted to cultivating them had gone to waste. More importantly, it had caused a huge trauma to his soul, causing his cultivation to plummet. He was a powerful Saint 3 Dan pinnacle cultivator before, but at this moment it would already be a huge blessing if he could exert the might of a Saint 2 Dan pinnacle cultivator. Boom. Since even the dark gold venom beetles were unable to poison the other party to death, the Hall Master knew that the other poisons he had in his possession were unlikely to work as well. Roaring furiously, his junchi flurried, forming a massive palm in the sky that struck down with imposing momentum. But before the palm could strike Sun Qiong, the latter abruptly stood up, and with his eyes still closed, he flicked his wrist and whipped out a spear. In an instant, his aura changed. It was even more fearsome than Zhang Yang back then. With a spear in his hand, his presence felt as if a majestic dragon amongst the clouds, dominating the world with its fearsome might. Voila! He tossed the spear upwards with incredible might, and the two forces clashed with one another in the sky. A huge shockwave burst forth from the collision, forcing Zhongxian to take 2 steps backward. After which, with a forceful step, he leaped upwards to grab his spear before directing it down towards the enemy. In this instant, it felt as if the line between spear and man had been thinned. The spear was part of the man, and the man was part of the spear as well, spearman union. Immense Shunqi was channeled into the spear, and it was further augmented with the incomparably powerful physical strength which Zhongxian possessed. Even before his spear could reach the other party, the bluestone pavement on the ground had already burst open. The ground where the Hall Master stood abruptly collapsed inward, creating a huge depression. "Damn you!" Bellowing furiously, the Hall Master charged up furiously to face Zhongxian. Had it been under normal circumstances, as powerful as the other party was, he was confident that he would have been able to subdue or even kill the other party easily with his Saint 3 Dan pinnacle cultivation. However, all 9 of his life-bound venomous bugs had just been killed. Both his body and his soul had sustained severe damage, preventing him from even exerting a tenth of his original strength. Clashing directly with the other party, he gradually felt that he was being overwhelmed. But the enemy was only a nascent saint. "I don't believe that I can't kill you." Bellowing furiously once more, the Hall Master drove his junchi to the limits, such that it was beginning to release gulu-gulu noises, reminiscent of boiling water. Boom! As the spear tip and the palm collided with one another, a loud explosion sounded. The sheer force emanated from the collision reduced all building in an area of several hundred meters into dust. The poison masters who had been hanging around the corner to watch the show suddenly felt an immense threat on their life, and they hurriedly retreated in fear, not daring to stand close. Pu. The closed eyes Sun Qiong seemed to be unable to withstand the full might of the Hall Master. Spurting a mouthful of blood, he was sent flying before crashing heavily onto the ground. The cultivation of the Saint Ascension Decipher did granted Zhongxian the strength to challenge opponents beyond him, but there was a limit to it. The strength harnessed by the Hall Master was simply too great. He was no match for it at all. But of course, if his soul was in his body at this moment, he would have been able to use the Library of Heaven's path to peer through the other party's flaws and design a combat strategy to corner the other party. However, having only his reflexes to rely on at the moment, he could only clash face to face with the other party, and that clearly placed him in a very disadvantageous position. Die! After knocking Sun Qiong flying, the Hall Master rushed forward to pursue him. From the previous collision, he had gained a rough gauge of the other party's strength. The other party was indeed formidable for a nascent saint, but compared to him, the other party was still lacking a little. As long as he were to push on forcefully, not giving other party an opportunity to catch a breather, he would surely be able to corner the other party and kill him. Who? Sensing danger from the man before him, Sun Qiong seemed to have gotten apprehensive. Tossing the spear in his hand out towards the Hall Master, he hurriedly turned around and fled. In the blink of an eye, He was already a few hundred meters away. Where do you think you are escaping to? Not expecting the other party to have no principles at all, fighting arrogantly with his eyes closed a moment ago only to be fleeing shamelessly a moment later, the Hall Master bellowed angrily. He quickly charged forward and sent another palm strike at the other party. Hong long. The overwhelming might of the palm smashed a huge depression into the ground. However, the other party was simply too nimble, evading his attack with ease. Stop him. Seeing the other party getting faster and faster, the Hall Master knew that he wouldn't be able to keep up with the other party given the severe injuries his body had sustained. Thus, he turned around and commanded. Yes. Not daring to hesitate, the elders and the Vice Hall Masters hurriedly rushed forward to pursue Sun Qiong. With great speed they pursued the other party, but the other party was even faster. On top of that, he was darting around randomly with his eyes closed. As a result of that, he was crashing forcefully into everything in his way, knocking down buildings of all sorts. In just a few moments, the entire island was cloaked in a massive cloud of dust. Even the ancient buildings which had stood proudly for innumerable years as the heritage of the Poison Hall hadn't been spared from the destruction. Looking at how the heritage which the predecessors had entrusted to his hands been devastated by the fellow before him, the Hall Master felt as if his head was going to split apart. Flicking his wrist, he whipped out a token and infused Zhenqi into it. The token gradually rose to the air, and seemingly communicating with some kind of unique power, it emanated a blinding radiance. I am the 30th Hall Master of the Poison Hall. I command for the activation of the Great Guardian Formation. Hong long long. As the voice sounded, the light radiated by the token grew brighter and brighter. The massive formation which hid the entire island seemed to have been awakened by some kind of unique power, and it gradually whirred into action. The formation of the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall's founding ancestor was not only able to hide the island, it could also corner and poison to death any invaders of the island easily. The fellow was willfully causing destruction as he escaped. If he was left to be, the innumerable years of Poison Hall's heritage could very well be destroyed. Wang. As the formation came to live, a powerful might burst towards the escaping Zhongxian not too far away. Hula. The power of the formation was omnipresent on the island, and it fell at a speed too fast for Zhongxian to dodge. In an instant, his movement had been completely sealed, as if a cage had been constructed around him. Temph, let's see how you can escape from this. Noting the tremendous strength of the formation, the eyes of the Hall Master lit up as he hurriedly made his way over. However, before he could rush up to the other party, the trapped middle-aged man seemed to have suddenly received an epiphany as a look of realization crept onto his face. After which, he took a few steps back within the seal and stomped his feet forcefully. Catcher. The seal immediately broke. After which, the middle-aged man raised his right hand and grasped the air abruptly. Who? Following which, the token before the Hall Master suddenly seemed to run amok, and it flew straight into the other party's hand. What? Widened his eyes in shock, the Hall Master was horrified. To break the seal and snatch the token from his hands so easily, there could only be one possibility. The other party had a thorough comprehension of the massive formation around the island and was aware of the flaws regarding it. By exploiting its flaws, the other party had stolen the controlling rights over the formation from him. But how could this be possible? Back then, the founding ancestor had spent many years studying the blueprint and the geographical terrain of the island, reworking it again and again, each time bringing it a step closer towards perfection, before he finally set up the formation. There were quite a number of predecessors who were proficient in the way of formations as well, but even they were unable to grasp the entirety of the formation. The fellow had been here for less than a day, and he had already made sense of it and found its flaws. Just how in the world could such a thing happen? As astonished as the Hall Master was, he moved swiftly to wrestle control over the token, which served as the key to controlling the formation. However, in the next moment, the middle-aged man, with his eyes still closed, abruptly flicked his wrist. Voila! An incredible force assaulted the Hall Master, causing his body to stiffen all of the sudden. With the control of the formation in the middle-aged man's hand, the other party had called upon the power of the formation to seal his movements, returning the favor to him. Damn it! With eyes blazing with fury, the Hall Master exerted his full strength to struggle free of the formation. But before he could do so, a foot suddenly arrived right before his face. Pang! Cling, cling, cling! Under the impact of the kick, several of the Hall Master's teeth fell to the ground, and blood trickled down his nose and mouth. Sun Qiong, how dare you strike me? I will tear you apart. The Hall Master roared furiously. Yet, before he could finish his words, the other party's punches and kicks fell in rapid succession on him, effectively silencing him. Pili-pala. Within just 10 breaths, the Hall Master had already sustained at least 40 fists and 60 kicks, leaving his dignified face distorted in an almost comical manner. If thrown out onto the streets, there was no one who would dare believe that he was the amicable Hall Master. Under normal circumstances, even if he was unable to kill the other party wouldn't be able to harm him easily either. Who could have known that his decision to draw upon the formation to corner the other party would backfire on him instead? He ended up handing power over to the other party's hand, giving the other party an opportunity to pummel him viciously. At that moment, the Hall Master felt so frustrated that he felt like his mind was going to explode. He was the head of the Poison Hall, the most powerful and authoritative man of the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall. Yet, for his formation to be used against him like that, what the heck was this? Why did it feel like the other party was the Hall Master instead, whereas he was the invader? Hall Master. The elders and vice-Hall Masters who had rushed over to help arrived at this moment. Upon the Hall Master being on the verge of death from being pummeled by Sun Qiong, they scratched their heads in bewilderment, not knowing what they should do. They thought that with the Hall Master making a move himself, victory would be theirs to clinch. They would be able to get even the other party and vie back their dignity. Yet, who could have thought that their Hall Master would first have his life-bound venomous bugs being poisoned to death first before being pummeled so pitifully? Retract your killing intent towards Sun Qiong, otherwise, he will kill you. Noting that the Hall Master was on the verge of death, an elder suddenly recalled the situation earlier and shouted, "Retract my killing intent." The swollen-faced Hall Master had no idea how that would aid him in his current plight, but there must be a rationale for that elder to utter such words. Thus, suppressing his rage, he attempted to quench the killing intent he had for the other party. Right after doing so, Sun Qiong indeed came to a halt. He sat down on the ground not too far away and continued to cultivate. From the start to the end, he had never opened his eyes, not even for an instant. It was as if everything he had done thus far was a product of his sleepwalking. What is going on? I was actually pummeled by a sleepwalking person? The eyes of the Hall Master reddened in indignance. As the head of the Poison Hall, it would be one thing for him to be pummeled by an expert, but the other party was just a nascent saint, a sleepwalking one at that. What a farce this was! At this moment, Zhongxian's soul had just finished collecting the books on the 3rd floor of the Compendium Hall. Sensing a torrent of spiritual energy gathering outside, as if a formation coming into life, Zhongxian frowned in displeasure. After which, the deafening ruckus of innumerable buildings being collapsed reverberated relentlessly in the air. Eventually, Zhongxian snapped in annoyance, "How noisy! Can't they quieten down a little? I am trying to read here." Chapter 1002. Irreconcilable Zhongxian was seething with anger. Where was he? The Poison Hall. A place isolated from the world, filled with countless formidable poison masters. Shouldn't it be an extremely peaceful place where everyone diligent strove to create the best poison they could? Dang lang. Hong long. Boom. Just what the heck were those? It was not as if they were some kind of demolition company. All he wanted was some peace so that he could finish reading all of the books in a single go. But with such noise, how was he supposed to do so? Seriously, did the poison masters know no civility at all? That was really too much. He would really need to talk to Elder Shu about this matter so that he could enforce some order around here. Forget it, I will just have to tolerate it for this period of time. Zhongxian shook his head. In any case, he was just a guest. He would have to leave very soon, so all he had to do was to tolerate the incivility of those poison masters for the time being. Having collected the books in the first 3 floors into the Library of Heaven's Path, Zhongxian's comprehension of poison had reached 3-star pinnacle. Even though the books were rich in content, there was nothing much regarding the cure for the innate poison body. Most of the books that touched on it only introduced it as an extremely fearsome constitution. It rarely appeared in the world, perhaps not even once in 10,000 years, but the moment it did, a devastating calamity could possibly befall on the world. According to the records, the founder of the Poison Hall possessed the innate poison body as well. There was an incident where the founder of the Poison Hall had clashed with Kongsha, and even the latter had to tread carefully around it, fearful of its might. There is nothing at the moment, but I might be able to find a solution once I go through the books in the higher floors. Zhongxian sighed deeply as he consoled himself. However, considering how noisy it was unlikely that he would be able to make much progress. Thus, he decided to leave for the moment and return later on. Thus, he returned back to the first floor and slipped past the 2 guards at the entrance, leaving the compendium hall. However, just as he was about to return back to his residence, he couldn't help but freeze at the sight before him. The dignified and stately buildings 4 hours ago had been reduced to rubble. Within an area of several dozen kilometers, there was not a person to be seen at all. This. Zhongxian widened his eyes in shock. Through his eyes, he could tell that this was caused by a battle between experts. But shouldn't the battles be limited to the sparring hall? Why would they start fighting in the midst of the city instead? Look at what they had done to the beautiful city. They are indeed uncivil. These buildings have been around for several thousand years. To fight in the middle of the city, don't they know that these are important heritage that we have to protect? Zhongxian muttered as he shook his head. The poison masters sure are lacking decorum. Just look at the master teachers. Even to hold a life-and-death duel, they would apply for permission with the headquarter first before deciding on the format of the duel. Yet, this to start fighting in the middle of the city, reducing so many beautiful buildings into rubble. It is really hard to fathom how a human could be so inconsiderate. With such thoughts in mind, Zhongxian began flying back to his residence. However, before he could get far, he suddenly realized something. He hadn't really noticed it due to the formation around the compendium hall earlier, but now that he was finally out, he suddenly found that his physical body had changed locations. It wasn't in the accommodation which Elder Shu had provided for him anymore. What is going on? A look of wariness slipped into Zhongxian's eyes. Typically speaking, his physical body should remain in the residence, not moving at all. For it to be somewhere else instead. Did someone make a move on him? If so, that would be really bad. His physical body had already acquired the ability of Mind of Void, granting it the ability to act reflexively to avert danger, but if the enemy was an expert, such as the Hall Master or Vice Hall Master of the Poison Hall, he would still be in grave danger. After all, they were 7-star poison masters. In comparison, his nascent saint cultivation body was truly too weak. If he were to return late and find his physical body completely crippled, it would be too late for tears. Anxious, he immediately charged in the direction where his physical body was. Before long, he saw his physical body seated on the floor, not moving in the least. Opposite to it stood a disfigured old man, who was currently looking at his physical body with malicious intents in his eyes. It's fortunate that I returned in time. Seeing that his physical body was safe, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. As he quickly slipped back into his body, he couldn't help but realize something. The area where his physical body was sitting at, wasn't it the center of the destruction? Could it be that all of the destruction throughout the city was caused by him? But that shouldn't be. His physical body did have the ability to retaliate and flee in face of danger, but it had always been rather reliable. At the very least, he trusted it more than his clone and vicious, and it had never caused him any trouble before. If he was truly the culprit behind the damage, how was he going to explain this to Elder Shu? With such thoughts in mind, his soul swiftly harmonized with his body, and his eyes slowly opened. He is awake. Yuan, he really is awake. He is already plenty formidable with his eyes closed. With his eyes open now, there would surely be no one who will be able to stop him. Are we going to meet our doom here? Seeing the other party open his eyes, a commotion broke out in the surroundings. Many faces paled in fright. Even with his eyes closed, the other party was able to kill 14 of their elders and pummel the hell out of their hall master. Now that his eyes were opened, would he massacre their poison hall clean? Why you? Upon seeing Sun Chong open his eyes, the hall master cowered in fear. Everything that had happened had dealt a deep trauma to him, causing him to feel innate fear towards the middle-aged man before him. Cough cough, where am I? What is going on? Looking at everyone's frightened look, as if he was a lunatic that had come out from a horror movie, Zhongxian felt a little stifled within. With a bewildered look, he gazed at the crowd around him. All I have done is to leave for a short moment to read some books. What in the world happened in between? For so many of you to be surrounding me, and not to mention the frightened look on your faces. Where am I? What is going on? Hearing those words, the hall master spurted yet another mouthful of blood. The heck? The other party really was sleepwalking. While other Saint 3 Dan cultivators were being overwhelmed by Saint 4 Dan and 5 Dan experts, he was being done in by a sleepwalking nascent Saint cultivator. Just the thought of him left him feeling suffocated within. To end up in such a plight despite being the head of the poison hall, it sure was embarrassing. Calm down, don't get agitated. I just woke up from my cultivation, so I am not too sure what is going on here. Why don't you fill me in on the details? Seeing the disfigured fellow before him spurting blood out of agitation after seeing him waking up, Zhongxian hurriedly consoled. You. Pew. Agitated? Agitated your head. Not too sure what is going on. Can you get any more shameless than that? All of this had been done by you. The reason why I have spurted blood is due to your pummeling. After taking advantage of us like that, you are going to shirk responsibility just by saying you don't know what is going on. Due to the intense fluctuations in his emotion, the hall master spurted yet another mouthful of blood. He felt so furious that it felt like flames could burst forth from his eyes. You aren't too sure what is going on? You have fought with the hall master and came all the way here, destroying countless buildings on the way. You are unaware of all of that. Seeing that the other party didn't seem to be feigning ignorance, an elder bucked up his courage and asked carefully. I fought with the hall master? Zhongxian blinked his eyes in confusion. Who is your hall master? I have never met him before, so how could I have fought with him? Could there be a misunderstanding somewhere? On the way here, he had heard from Elder Shu that the head of the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall was a 7-star poison master, a Saint 3 Dan pinnacle expert who boasted incredible fighting prowess. Against ordinary Saint 2 Dan experts, his physical body, driven by the mind of void, might still be able to achieve victory. However, against a Saint 3 Dan expert, his physical body would be crushed instantly. A completely one-sided fight couldn't possibly be called a battle, and it couldn't have lasted so long as to cause such devastating damage to the city. Before Zhongxian could finish his words, the disfigured fellow before him abruptly stood up furiously and hollered, I am the hall master. You! Zhongxian leaped in horror. When he saw that disfigured fellow, he thought that the other party was just a random passerby watching the commotion. Never once had he considered the possibility that the other party might be the strongest expert in the poison hall. I was the one. Who injured you? Zhongxian's lips twitched. He actually reduced a Saint 3 Dan pinnacle expert to such a tragic state? Could it be that the strength of his mind of void had been enhanced somehow? You! The hall master was on the verge of erupting. I am truly apologetic. I was in a unique cultivation state earlier, and everything I did is only out of my reflexes. I truly have no idea what is going on. Knowing that it was likely that he would only worsen the conflict if he were to dwell on the matter, Zhongxian hurriedly apologized. He was here to learn, not to make enemies. What he had to do at this moment was to find out what had happened so as to find out if there was anything he could do to salvage the situation. After all, he had promised Elder Shu that he would keep a low profile, and such was his intention as well. As far as it was possible, he hoped to resolve this matter peacefully. You really don't know? Seeing the other party emphasize again and again that he was unaware of the happenings, the elders and vice hall masters glanced at one another with a hint of doubt in their eyes. Thinking back, the other party had never opened his eyes throughout the entire incident. It was as if he was sleepwalking. his body moving on reflex only to retaliate against those who were making a move against him. Could it be that this really wasn't an intentional act on his part, but just his reflexive action? But if that was really the case, it would portray the Poison Hall out to be a clown instead. The other party hadn't used his full strength throughout the entire course of the matter, relying solely on his reflexes, and yet, by the end of it, the Poison Hall was already on the verge of collapse. If others were to learn of the matter, their Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall would become a huge laughingstock. I really have no idea. Zhongxian shook his head affirmatively. He was indeed confused by everything that was around him at the moment. His physical body possessed no consciousness whatsoever while his soul was out, so he was dumbstruck by the abrupt situation he found himself in as well. It's like that. You were in your courtyard cultivating, and Vice Hall Master Ming, who is the teacher of Duan Ren whom you have beaten up earlier, barged into your residence to exact vengeance for his disciple. Yet, who knew that you would disregard his existence entirely? As such, he began making a move on you. Seeing that Zhongxian didn't seem to be lying, the elder began to fill him in on the matters that had occurred. So, I was the one who caused all of this. Zhongxian widened his mouth in shock, and his eyeballs nearly bulged out to the ground. He was only off for a moment to collect some books for Wei Ruyan. Who could have known that his physical body would kill 14 elders of the Poison Hall, cripple a Vice Hall Master, pummel the Hall Master, and destroy large swathes of the Poison Hall within that short time frame? It seemed like he was really in deep trouble this time around. Indeed, you were the one who did it. The elder nodded. I. Zhongxian scratched his head helplessly. His original intention was indeed to collect all of the books in the Poison Hall quietly and leave as soon as possible. Who could have thought that his physical body would place him in such deep trouble in a crucial moment like this? Doomed. If he had only pummeled the Hall Master, he could still find an excuse to put a lid on the matter and resolve the matter peacefully with a shake of the hands and a compensation of a couple of high-tier spirit stones. But he had killed 14 elders and destroyed innumerable precious heritage buildings of the Poison Hall. Not to mention, he had even poisoned the other party's precious to death. Even if he were to take out everything he had, there was no way he could compensate for that. At this point, this could already be deemed as an irreconcilable grudge. This won't do. If I were to leave this matter be, there is no way they will allow me any chance to browse through the books in the remaining 4 floors. Furthermore, there is no saying that I might require the help of the Poison Masters to resolve Wei Ruyan's innate poison body, so I can't fall out with them now. A deep frown emerged on Zhongxian's forehead. Chapter 1003. I am your founder. His goal of coming to the Poison Hall wasn't to make a name for himself or to battle with the Poison Masters. It was to save Wei Ruyan, who was plagued by the innate poison body. Yet, before he could finish reading their books, his body had already killed 14 of the other party's elders and left the Hall Master in such a state. If Wei Ruyan's treatment were to be delayed due to this, how could he face her deceased father? It was not that he didn't consider letting his clone out to replace his physical body, but his clone was even more unreliable than it. If he were to let it out, there was a good chance that all of the elders, Vice Hall Masters, and even the Hall Master himself might have been dead by now. As for letting out the Violet Leaf King and the Byzantium Alios beast, considering that Zhongxian had come alone, it would be difficult for him to explain the additional guests. Since the Poison Hall had isolated itself on an island in the midst of the Viridian Cloud Sea, even going to the extent of casting a huge hidden formation over the island, it was natural that they didn't welcome guests. If it was found that he had brought others in on his own accord, it might strain his ties with those of the Poison Hall. He had thought that since he was only out to study for a brief moment, considering his identity as Elder Shu's guest, no one should dare to cause him trouble. That was also the reason why he had chosen to left his body in the room, or else his sudden disappearance would be hard to explain as well. Who could have thought that his careful considerations would end up resulting in this huge conflict? Looking at the raging Poison Masters before his eyes, Zhongxian felt his hair stand on ends. If everything were to fail, perhaps he could release the Violet Leaf King and the Byzantium Alios beast to help rid society of this poisonous tumor. As soon as this dangerous thought popped into Zhongxian's head, he hurriedly shook it off. He was a master teacher, not a butcher. Even though poison masters were generally snubbed in society, they hadn't caused any significant damage or harm to others. Not to mention, it would be utterly wrong to stereotype poison masters just by their occupation. Putting aside morals, he wouldn't be able to even get past his own conscience. After contemplating for a moment, Zhongxian asked, "May I know where Elder Shu is?" Under such circumstances, he could only rely on a familiar face to speak up on his stead and mediate this situation. "Elder Shu has brought a threat amongst us, resulting in the death of our elders. For his betrayal of the Poison Hall, I ordered my men to apprehend him. He shall be dealt with shortly later." Hearing Zhongxian's question, the hall master replied through gritted teeth. Had it not been for Elder Shu bringing this man of unknown background here, their Poison Hall wouldn't have suffered such staggering losses. Regardless of how they dealt with Sun Qiong eventually, Elder Shu must be punished for his actions. Betrayal of the Poison Hall? This. Elder Shu's loyalty to the Poison Hall is clear for all to see. Don't you think that it's a little too extreme to make such a decision? Zhongxian stood up in agitation and hurriedly spoke up for Elder Shu's behalf. It was one thing for the other party to hold him accountable for this matter. After all, it was a fact that his physical body did cause devastating damage to the Poison Hall. But Elder Shu had nothing to do with it. The other party deeply trusted him and even offered him advice out of concern, fearing that he might meet with danger in the Poison Hall. If the other party were to be implicated by his actions, he would be guilt-ridden. "You are indeed strong, but we can't the deaths of so many of our elders to go unavenged. Even if our Poison Hall has to fight down to the very last man, we won't back down," the hall master roared furiously. At this point, it didn't matter whether the other party had done it unintentionally due to his sleepwalk or not anymore. The deaths of the elders had already created an irreconcilable grudge between them, and this was not something that could be resolved without spilling blood. There was no way the Poison Hall could let the murderer of 14 of their elders get away scot-free. The other party might be a powerful adversary, but the Poison Hall's dignity was at stake. They couldn't let the reputation of the Poison Hall collapse in their generation, or else they wouldn't be able to face their predecessors. "Men, bring Shu Yu up here. We will first execute him before dealing with this fellow." Waving his hand, the hall master bellowed. "Yes." The elders hesitated for a moment before two of them flew away. A short moment later, they arrived with Elder Shu locked between them. Looking at the destruction around the Poison Hall, Elder Shu's lips quivered as self-reproach crept into his eyes. In his view, if he hadn't brought Sun Qiong over, such a matter wouldn't have happened. At this point, he couldn't help but wish that the man who had died back then was him and not Elder Shui. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" the hall master asked coldly. "I." Elder Shu's body stiffened. A moment later, he sighed deeply and said, "For causing such deep trouble, I am willing to accept any punishment." It was due to his inability to discern people properly that resulted in such a situation. Even 1,000 deaths wouldn't absolve him of his sins. "It's good that you admit to your crimes." Turning his face away from Elder Shu, the hall master commanded, "Execute him." In truth, he also didn't want to execute Elder Shu. After all, they had spent centuries together with one another. However, if he didn't do anything after all that had happened, he could very well lose the hearts of the Poison Masters. As the head of the Poison Hall, this was a painful decision that he had no choice but to make. "Yes." The other elders nodded before turning their gazes to Elder Shu with a complicated expression on their faces. "There's no need for you all to make a move. I will do it myself." As old friends, Elder Shu couldn't bear to allow his friends to bear the burden of killing him. Thus, gritting his teeth, he began channeling his zhenqi, intending to direct them towards his heart to crush it. However, before he could do so, Sun Qiong's voice sounded. "Wait a moment." Lifting his gaze, he realized that, at some point, the anxiety on Sun Qiong's face had been replaced with absolute composure. His head was slightly tilted upwards, and his hands were placed behind his back. With an air of majesty around him, he gazed deeply into the sky. "Since it has gotten down to this, there is no need for me to conceal my identity as further." "Identity?" Everyone frowned in bewilderment. The hall master also couldn't help but turn his gaze over, curious to see what that fellow was up to. Indeed. Nodding, Zhongxian continued with a calm but powerful voice. Do you know what kind of constitution the founder of the poison hall has? Our founder possesses the innate poison body, fearing no poison in the world. It is due to this that our founder was able to create the poison hall and bring it to glory. Not knowing what the other party was up to, the hall master replied. He strongly desired to kill the fellow before him, but considering the latter's strength, he knew that there was no way he could win without careful preparation. Thus, he could only rein in his rage for the time being. As a poison master, he wasn't foreign to the matters surrounding their founder. Indeed. It is the innate poison body. Zhongxian nodded. Then, do you know why the poisons you have used against me is completely ineffective? This. The crowd fell silent. In truth, this was also something which they were perplexed about. To be able to neutralize all of their poisons and even the hall master's beetles, could there really be such a powerful antidote in the world? Could it be? Could it be that you also possess the innate poison body? The hall master's body stiffened as he turned his gaze over. The other party first spoke about the founder of the poison hall before pointing out how he didn't fear poison. Clearly, he was trying to drive at something. No, I don't. Zhongxian shook his head. You don't. The crowd glanced at one another, speechless. If you don't possess the innate poison body, what the hell are you spouting all of those crap for? To be more exact, I am not too sure either. It's just that whenever I start cultivating, I will fall into a peculiar state. It would be as if another soul has taken over my body, leaving me unable to control my actions. In that state, I will be completely immune to all poisons, similar to that of the innate poison body. Zhongxian said. Another soul has taken over your body. Completely immune to all poisons. Everyone was dumbfounded. Are you trying to tell us a horror story here? That's right. Zhongxian shook his head with a bitter smile. I know that what I am saying might sound ridiculous, and I don't blame you for not trusting you. However, this is the truth. Previously, when I fought with you all, despite the dangerous situation I was in, I didn't open my eyes at all, right? Hearing those words, the crowd nodded. Indeed. The other party hadn't opened his eyes once in the duration of the entire battle, as if he was sleepwalking. In truth, it is not that I didn't want to open my eyes, but that my body was being controlled by another will. And if I am not mistaken, the will is the founder of the poison hall. Zhongxian said. There is another will inside your body, the founder of the poison hall? You must be joking. Everyone frowned. The founder of the poison hall was a figure who shared the same era with Kongsha, and it had been several dozen thousand years since then. There was no way the other party could still be alive at this point, so how could the other party possibly possess this fellow here? I know what I am saying might sound ridiculous, but such is the truth. Since that is the case, why don't I continue cultivating and allow him to control my body? Perhaps he could answer the doubts you have. Shaking his head, a look of difficulty surfaced on Zhongxian's face. After a moment of hesitation, he clenched his jaws in determination and sat cross-legged down on the floor. Hong Long. As soon as he sat down, everyone immediately felt the formation surrounding the entire island buzzing into life, seemingly driven by someone. Following which, Sun Qiong's eyes slowly opened, and a heavy and ancient voice came out of his mouth. Why? Are you doubting my identity? The voice was very different from the tone which Sun Qiong took earlier. It harnessed domineering authority which exerted immense pressure on one's soul. While it wasn't as intense as the killing intent of the otherworldly demons, there was no doubt that one's soul could shatter if placed under such pressure for extended periods of time. Upon hearing the voice, everyone's eyes narrowed in astonishment. Be it the voice or the aura, it was vastly different from the Sun Qiong from a moment ago. Without a doubt, they were two completely different people. Furthermore, the aura emanated felt ancient, reminiscent of someone who had lived through many eras. Elder, you said that you are our founder, but do you have any evidence to prove so? With cold sweat trickling down his forehead, the hall master gritted his teeth and asked respectfully. Are you saying that I need to prove myself to you? Who do you think you are? The seated Sun Qiong uttered coldly. It's not that we are doubting Elder's identity, but our founder has disappeared from the world for more than several dozen years, so it's really difficult for us to comprehend how you can be sharing a body with this person over here. The Hall Master replied hurriedly. "PH, I shall give you the benefit of the doubt and pardon you this once." Sun Chong harumphed coldly. At this point, he paused for a moment, seemingly reminiscing the sorrows of the past before continuing. "In truth, I am only a remaining soul fragment of my former self. It is out of sheer coincidence that I managed to latch myself onto a Seven Hearts Lotus and survived. It is Sun Chong over here who found the Seven Hearts Lotus and brought me out of the ancient domain I was in. Eventually, I latched myself to his body, but I am only able to appear while he's cultivating. Otherwise, do you think that a mere nascent saint lad will be able to see through this formation, remain impervious to all poison, and defeat you all easily?" Sun Chong harumphed. The Hall Master was stunned. To be honest, even at this point, he still could hardly believe that he had lost to Sun Chong. He could tell that the other party was indeed only as nascent saint, so how could a Saint 3 Dan pinnacle expert like him lose to the other party? Even if his life-bound venomous bugs had been killed, resulting in a significant decline in his strength, he was still able to draw forth might comparable to a Saint 2 Dan pinnacle. For a nascent saint to be able to stand toe-to-toe with him. Not once in his long life had he ever met such a formidable genius before. But what was the most frightening of all was that the other party's Jinchi seemed to be endless. After killing 14 elders, wounding a vice hall master, and fighting with him for so long, the other party didn't seem to be weakened in the least. That was completely inconceivable. And on top of that, the other party was completely immune to poison. Not only was the other party fine after being bitten by his dark gold venom beetles, the other party even managed to poison his beetles to death instead. There was something clearly very peculiar about this situation. Not to mention, there was still the matter concerning the formation. To be able to comprehend and even wrestle control over the formation from him, that was definitely not a feat a nascent saint cultivator was capable of. "Elder, is there any concrete evidence you can provide to prove that you are indeed the soul fragment of our founder?" The Hall Masters asked doubtfully. This was a matter concerning their founder, and as the Hall Master of this Poison Hall branch, he had to deal with this matter prudently. If it was just me, I would have killed all of you without any hesitation for doubting my words. You are fortunate that Sun Chong is unwilling to see any more bloodshed and advised against it, so I will overlook this matter." Sun Chong harumphed coldly. The founder of the Poison Hall possesses not only the innate poison body but the poison soul constitution as well. As poison masters yourselves, surely I need not say anything more on how one can verify the poison soul constitution. Chapter 1004, Paying Respects to the Founder Poison Soul Constitution. The Hall Master paused for a moment before nodding. The Poison Soul Constitution, as the name suggested, meant that one's soul was completely immune to poisons of all kinds. For several dozen millenniums, ever since the passing of the founder of the Poison Hall, there had never been another person in the world with such a constitution. If they could confirm that the fragmented soul did possess such a constitution, they could confirm that the other party was indeed the founder. Even if that wasn't the case, an individual who possessed such constitution would surely be bound to advance to unprecedented heights in the future. It was just a matter of time before the other party became a 9-star poison master and made a mark for himself in the world. With such thoughts in mind, the Hall Master didn't hesitate for too long before flicking his wrist to whip out a jade bottle. This jade bottle was slightly different from the other bottles which he used to store his poisons. It was roughly the size of his palm, and there were bizarre inscriptions carved on its exterior. The body of the closed eyes Sun Chong stiffened for a brief moment upon seeing the bottle, seemingly noticing something unbelievable. However, this anomaly only surfaced for an instant. Before anyone could notice it, he had already reverted back to his impassive state. This is a poison which can easily exterminate a soul, the Emerald Serenity Jaundice poison. It is concocted out of the killing intent of otherworldly demons and many precious herbs. It was left behind by one of the predecessors of the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall, and it is powerful enough to even eradicate a Saint 4 Dan expert's soul easily. Even with my current proficiency, I am unable to concoct such a medicine, the Hall Master explained. If you truly possess the innate poison body, you will surely be able to consume the poison without suffering the slightest damage. There was only one way to ascertain whether an individual possessed the poison soul constitution or not: the consumption of poison. As long as the other party was fine after consuming the lethal poison, it would mean that the other party wasn't lying. On the other hand, if the other were to die after consuming the poison, it would mean that they have successfully avenged the deceased elders of the Poison Hall. In a sense, the Hall Master and the others had nothing to lose from this. Very well. Sun Chong nodded. With a hook of his finger, the jade bottle flew into his hands. Without any hesitation, he uncorked the bottle, and a gush of malicious intent burst forth from it. It pierced right into one's mind, raising a violent storm in one's head. The Hall Master and the others hurriedly turned their gazes over and noted that Sun Chong didn't show the slightest hint of weakness under the assault of the poison aura. Not only so, his face was gradually growing redder and redder, as if he had just consumed some extremely nourishing substance. It was as if what he had been exposed to wasn't poison but a heavenly tonic instead. Legend has it that those who possesses the innate poison body are able to advance their cultivation by consuming poison. As long as there is a sufficient supply of poison, one's cultivation and fighting prowess can be raised by leaps and bounds within a short period of time. Could the rumors be true? An elder mumbled in astonishment. The innate poison body was extremely rare in this world, such that it was considered to be something that only existed in the legends. However, there were some rumors and records regarding it within the books. It was said that those who possessed the innate poison body were able to derive power from coming into contact with lethal poison that could kill others easily, and as such, they were the most suited to become poison masters. That was also the reason why many poison masters hoped to obtain such a constitution as well. However, the innate poison body was only effective on one's body, whereas the Emerald Serenity Jaundice poison was something that assaulted the soul. For the other party's soul to not be wounded but instead nourished by it, that reflected a lot. There was little doubt about it at this point: the other party did possess the poison soul constitution. A person who possessed such a constitution and was capable of peering through the secrets regarding the great protective formation of the Poison Hall with a glance and challenging experts far stronger than him. Even if the fellow before him wasn't the founder, it was almost certain that there were intricate ties between the both of them. Is this enough evidence for you? Just as the Hall Master was deep in thoughts, Sun Chong's voice sounded once more. Aye. The Hall Master was still slightly hesitant. It was certain that the other party possessed the Poison Soul Constitution, but to say that he was the founder of the Poison Hall, this entire matter was still a little too ridiculous for him to believe. Why? You still don't believe me? If not for Sun Chong begging me earnestly for me to spare you, I would have all of you killed right here and now for your insolence. Hong Long. With a furious bellow, an incomparably powerful aura burst forth from Sun Chong's body. In that instant, the man before them suddenly felt like a divine being, an existence that was inviolable by any mortal. The divine aura emanated by the other party erased all lingering doubt in the Hall Master's mind. Without any hesitation, he kneeled to the floor and kowtowed. Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall's Hall Master, Ruo Qingyuan, pays respect to the founder. In the fight earlier, it was apparent that none of them was a match for the other party. Wielding such overwhelming advantage over them, the other party could have just slaughtered them clean. There was no need for the other party to waste words explaining to them at all. Perhaps, the founder might have really managed to survive through the ages by hiding a fragment of soul within a Seven Hearts lotus. Perhaps, the person before them was really their founder. Having reasoned all of this out, the Hall Master couldn't help but tremble in agitation. For the founder to actually appear here, if the other party were to just offer them a bit of pointers, their fighting prowess would surely be able to soar by leaps and bounds. It wouldn't be long before the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall was brought to greatness. Without a doubt, this was a great opportunity to him. Mate, it seems like there is some hope for you after all. Seeing that the other party finally admitted his identity, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Without opening his eyes, he lifted a finger and pointed at himself. With a grim face, he continued, Sun Chong over here is my savior. If not for him, my soul could have perished long ago. Thus, all of you here shall obey his words in the future. Take his commands to be those of my own as well. Anyone who dares to disobey him, don't blame me for not having mercy on you. Yes. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan and the other elders hurriedly nodded. Who would dare to disobey a direct order from the founder? Also, I was the one who killed those elders and wounded Vice Hall Master Ming. If you wish to exact vengeance, you are free to come at me, Zhong Xian continued. I dare not to. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan quickly shook his head fearfully. Vice Hall Master Ming and the others are at fault for offending you, they only have themselves to blame for their own fate. We dare not to exact vengeance for them. I doubt you would dare. Zhong Xian harumphed coldly as his voice gradually echoed into silence. A moment later, his eyes slowly opened once more, and his confusion was reflected clearly in his eyes. It was as if he was completely unaware in everything that had happened before. What just happened? Hall Master, I plead with you not to make things difficult for Elder Shu. He is really not to blame for this matter. All he did was to bring me here. Noting the look of bewilderment on Zhong Xian's faces, everyone immediately realized that the founder's soul had gone dormant once more. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan hurriedly clasped his fist and said, Poison Master Sun, please don't worry. Our founder has already explained the situation to us. Elder Huang and the others have shown blatant disrespect to our founder, and they deserve the fate that fell upon them. On the other hand, for bringing our founder back to us, not only has Elder Shu not sinned, he is even a meritorious subject of our Poison Hall. Naturally, we will reward him generously. From today onward, he shall replace Ming Zhan as the Vice Hall Master of the Poison Hall. Vice Hall Master? Elder Shu was stunned to hear the abrupt news. He hurriedly shook his hand and said in a fluster, Hall Master, I am unqualified to assume such a position. He was only a 6-star pinnacle poison master, and the minimum rank one needed to have to become the Vice Hall Master was 7-star. If he were to be promoted haphazardly like that, the others would surely voice their complaints. Don't worry, they won't dare to do anything with me here. You are more than qualified to assume this role, so don't turn it down anymore. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan waved his hand. The merit for escorting their founder back to the Poison Hall was immeasurable. Besides, they were still hoping to depend on Elder Shu to speak well of them before the founder on their behalf. Perhaps, their founder might just offer them some pointers on the way of poison under Elder Shu's coaxing. All right then. Seeing the other party insisting on it, Elder Shu eventually nodded in agreement. He turned his gaze towards Sun Qiong once more, and this time, his eyes were filled with admiration. This explained the other party's inconceivable immunity to and incredibly profound knowledge regarding poison. With just a short lecture, the other party was able to show a veteran poison master like him a whole new perspective towards the interpretation of the way of poison. The other party was indeed lucky to have the founder's fragmented soul in his body. Very few in the world would meet with such fortuitous encounter in their life. It seems like I managed to get past them for the time being. Seeing that he had managed to convince everyone of his new identity, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He turned his gaze towards the words on the bottle in his hand once more, and his eyebrows shot up once more. Gesturing for the Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan to come over, he asked, Hall Master, do you know what language are these words in? The inscriptions on the jade bottle of the Emerald Serenity Jaundice poison was extremely familiar. He had seen words identical to them before the map which Wu Yangzi had left behind. This was precisely the reason why Zhong Xian was shocked when he scanned the bottle with his soul earlier. Unable to hold his intrigue back any longer, he asked about it. These inscriptions? I have no idea as well. 2,000 years, a hall master of our Poison Hall found an ancient booklet from an ancient domain, and the content of the booklet happens to be written in this very language. Due to our inability to interpret it, we were unable to figure out what it means. However, by a stroke of coincidence, we found that these words are exceptionally effective in sealing malicious intents and that sort. Thus, we began using it as a seal in the Poison Hall. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan replied. Ancient booklet? Sealing malicious intent? Zhong Xian frowned in confusion. He had seen the same words on the map Wu Yangzi left for him. Were the purpose of those words to seal malicious intents as well? Is that ancient booklet still around? Is it possible for you to allow me a look? After pondering for a while, Zhongxian was still unable to make sense of the situation. Thus, he decided to ask for the ancient booklet to take a look at it. As there was no error in the coordinates and labels on the map, there was no particularly useful flaw reflected in the library of Heaven's Path. However, if he could obtain the booklet with the other party spoke about, he just might be due a cross-reference between the two and decipher bits of the language. Furthermore, 2,000 years ago. That coincided with the timing which the map of the ancient domain first appeared, according to what the Violet Leaf King said. Could there be a connection between the two? Ancient booklet. Back then, many elites of the Poison Hall lost their lives to acquire that booklet. The Hall Master back then felt that the booklet was inauspicious, so he ordered for it to be buried with him upon his death. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan shook his head. The ancient booklet is buried. Zhongxian frowned. May I know where it is at the moment? It is in the mausoleum of Hall Masters. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan replied. I see. Hearing that it was located in one of the forbidden grounds of the Poison Hall, Zhongxian decided to ask no further. If he were to ask too much about the matter, he just might incur the other party's suspicions. After questioning everything there was to question, Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan ordered his men to swiftly prepare a new accommodation for Sun Qiong. As for the matter regarding the Poison Master examination, considering that the other party was able to even poison his life-bound venomous bug to death, there was no longer any purpose to the examination. Thus, he helped the other party apply for the 7-star Poison Master emblem straight. I will be heading to the Compendium Hall to study for a while. Considering Zhongxian had received his 7-star Poison Master emblem and his identity as the founder, there was no longer for him to sneak into the Compendium Hall anymore. With the current esteemed standing he had, he could just walk in openly. Yes. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan and the others didn't dare to voice any word of objection. They escorted the other party to the entrance of the Compendium Hall, and after seeing the other party entering the premises, they glanced at one another meaningfully. Vice Hall Master Shu and the others, follow me to my residence for a while. UN. The others nodded. Not too long later, they arrived at a courtyard. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan activated a formation to isolate their auras before looking deeply at the crowd. Everyone, what are your views on the matter today? Since we can confirm that the soul in Sun Qiong's body does indeed possess the poison soul constitution, we can be certain that there is an intricate link between him and our founder. Indeed, that is the poison soul constitution we are talking about. Other than our founder, there has never been another person in the one known to possess such a constitution. The other elders nodded in agreement. They had a deep trust in Sun Qiong's identity as the founder of the Poison Hall. Vice Hall Master Shu, what are your views on this matter? Can you share the details of how you met Poison Master Sun with us so that we can analyze the matter? Hall Master Ruo Qingyun asked. Chapter 1005, Envoy from the Poison Hall Headquarters. Vice Hall Master Shu Yu nodded as he went through what he had gone through with Zhongxian in detail. You are saying that a Saint 4 Dan otherworldly demon has appeared in Jingyuan City? He tried to kill you, but it was Poison Master Sun who got you out. Everyone was astonished to hear the news. Otherworldly demons possessed exceptionally strong fighting prowess, and this was even more so for a Saint 4 Dan 1. For Sun Qiong to put himself in grave danger to save Shu Yu. Just this courage itself was something they couldn't compare with. Not only so, Poison Master Sun has also imparted me some foundation to utilizing poison on our way here, but due to its profoundness, I was unable to remember too much of it. However, if I could just internalize the small portion which I have remembered, I would surely be able to make huge progress in the way of poison. Shu Yu couldn't help but say, share it with us. Hearing that their founder had actually imparted some of his teachings to Shu Yu, looks of envy surfaced on everyone's faces. Without hiding a thing, Shu Yu began reciting everything that he remembered. By the time he was done reciting, everyone around him had their faces reddened in agitation, their clenched fists trembling uncontrollably beside them. Just like what Shu Yu had said, Even though the content only touched on the foundation, it was directed straight towards the essence of the way of poison. Listening to it had left them with a feeling of enlightenment. There's no doubt about it anymore. That soul is definitely our founder. Other than him, there is no one else can possesses such a deep understanding of poison. After a moment of discussion, Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan nodded affirmatively. Even though Zhong Xian's argument was convincing, and he had believed most of it, he still couldn't help but hold some reservations regarding the issue due to the sheer incredulity of it. However, after hearing Vice Hall Master Xu Yu's explanation, the final reservations he held were vanquished. Only the real founder of the Poison Hall could possibly command such deep understanding of the way of poison, interpreting the most basic cultivation technique in such a profound yet direct manner. All right, have our men quickly repair the demolished buildings. As for Duan Ren and Ming Zhen, have them executed for daring to provoke our founder. Having confirmed his doubts, Ruo Qingyuan issued several orders. Yes. The crowd nodded in agreement. It was one thing for Ming Zhen and Duan Ren to embarrass themselves, but to implicate so many of them into it as well, unforgivable. All right, we will stop right here today. Vice Hall Master Xu, you should wait outside the Compendium Hall. Once Poison Master Sun is done reading, call me over immediately. Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan instructed. All right, Xu Yu replied. Just as he was about to stand up and get moving, a frown suddenly appeared on Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan's face. The latter flicked his wrist, and a communication jade token appeared in his hands. The jade token was emanating a warm glow. Someone had just transmitted a message over. Taking a glance at it, Ruo Qingyuan's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly got to his feet. An envoy has arrived from the headquarters. The headquarters have sent an envoy over. Everyone was astonished. Indeed. According to the information I have just received, they are 2 7-star pinnacle poison masters, and they are about to arrive. Let's head over to welcome them. After saying those words, Ruo Qingyuan quickly left his residence. Not daring to hesitate in the least, the others also swiftly followed suit. Not too long later, at the elevated platform where Vice Hall Master Xu and Zhong Xian had landed from their aerial Saint Beast earlier, the crowd saw a gap appearing in the formation momentarily, and a massive Saint Beast flew over steadily. Standing proudly on the Saint Beast were 2 elders. Even before coming close, they were already emanating a formidable pressure that forced others to lower their heads before them. 7-star pinnacle poison masters, Saint 4 Dan Expert. Poison Master by Poison Master High. Upon seeing the appearance of the duo before him, Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan's eyebrows shot up, and he hurriedly clasped his fist and greeted. The Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall was well hidden from the rest of the world, but it still maintained intimate relations with the headquarters above it. Poison Master Bai Ting and Poison Master Hai Mingjin were extremely formidable figures in the headquarters, and considering their fame, it was only natural for Ruo Qingyuan to have heard of them as well. Poison Master Bai waved his hands as he landed from the Saint Beast, and after scanning through the crowd, he frowned. Where is Hall Master Ruo? He isn't here to welcome us. Cough cough. I am Ruo Qingyuan. Ruo Qingyuan said awkwardly. Disfigured from Zhong Xian's pummeling, even his wife and parents might not recognize him, let more these 2. You. Poison Master Bai glanced at Poison Master Hai, only to see the latter's mouth twitching uncontrollably as well. With a frown, he asked, Hall Master Ruo, what happened to you? One must know that Ruo Qingyuan was a 7-star poison master like them. Even though the other party's fighting prowess was slightly below theirs, there would still be very few in Qingyuan-conferred empire who could match him. For an expert like him to be pummeled to such a state in his own base, just what in the world could have happened? Astonished, they subconsciously turned their gazes to the elders, and what they saw caused their eyelids to twitch as well. They had only made a sweeping glance earlier, but taking a closer look, they realized that every single one of them was injured. There was only one amongst them who could be considered to be fine. It is a long story. Anyway, for the both of you to arrive personally, could it be that the headquarter has orders for us? Shaking his head with a bitter smile, Ruo Qingyuan turned to the duo and asked. It was not that he was intended to hide it from the other party, but it was simply too embarrassing. 2,000 years ago, did your branch obtain a booklet from the ancient domain in Firesource City? Seeing that the other party was unwilling to speak too much about it, Poison Master Bai also decided not to pursue the matter, considering that it was likely to be a private matter amongst them. Thus, he got straight to the matter at hand. Indeed. Ruo Qingyuan nodded. Poison Master Sun had just asked him about the booklet, so naturally, he still remembered it clearly at the moment. That's good. The headquarter has sent us here to retrieve this booklet. Hearing that the booklet was indeed here, Poison Master Bai heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Retrieve." Not expecting the headquarter to go to the extent of dispatching 2 7-star pinnacle poison masters over just to obtain a single booklet, Ruo Qingyuan was stunned for a brief moment before he could reply. The booklet is currently placed in the mausoleum of Hall Masters. If the both of you aren't in a hurry, allow me to invite you to take a seat at the main hall first. The booklet served no particular purpose here. If the headquarters wanted it, he had no qualms about giving it to them too. However, right after Ruo Qingyuan said those words, he noticed unnatural looks on the faces of Vice Hall Master Shu and the others. One of the elders hesitated for a moment before sending a Zhenqi telepathy over. "Hall Master, our main hall has been destroyed." The main hall was one of the unfortunate casualties of the devastating destruction earlier as well. Honestly speaking, the two envoys had really arrived at a bad timing. It was embarrassing that they had nothing seemly to show them after what that had happened. Ah! Upon the elder's reminder, Ruo Qingyuan suddenly recalled the matter and said, "Allow me to bring the both of you to my residence to rest then." "Your residence?" Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai frowned. If they had come here as visiting guests, there would be no problem for them to head to be hosted in Ruo Qingyuan's residence. However, they had come in the capacity as envoys of the headquarters this time around, and it was only right for them to be treated as esteemed guests. What was the other party thinking to invite them to his residence instead of the main hall? "Allow me to apologize for our discourtesy, but there has been some unforeseen circumstances in the Poison Hall that will make it inconvenient for me to invite you to the main hall." Noticing the displeased looks on their faces, Ruo Qingyuan shook his head with a bitter smile. "You will understand very soon." To be honest, he really had no idea how he should approach the subject. Flying the way back to the city, it didn't take long for the two poison masters from the headquarters to notice the heap of rubble laid all around the half-collapsed city. They couldn't help but exchange dazed glances. "This." Poison Master Hai pointed at the devastation before him, not knowing what he could say. They were in the Poison Hall, and everyone in here should be their own men. How did such a tragic fate befall it? "Hi, this matter is really the humiliation of our Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall," Ruo Qingyuan said. As the Hall Master of the Poison Hall, it was indeed embarrassing for him to have allowed it to have fallen to such a state. Had he not been so reckless then and waited for the other party to explain the situation, such a sight wouldn't have occurred, and he wouldn't be making a fool of himself before the envoys of the headquarters at this moment. What happened? Glancing at the bruised elders and hall masters, and turning his gaze to the rubble all around him, Poison Master Bai couldn't help but ask. "It's like that." Knowing that it was impossible to hide such a huge matter, Ruo Qingyuan hesitated for a moment before revealing everything that had just happened. "What did you say?" "Our founder's soul is deposited on the body of someone named Sun Qiong." Upon hearing the question, Poison Master Bai frowned. "That's impossible. The founder of our Poison Hall, otherwise known as the Poison Supremacy, was actually a woman. Back in that era, people used to call her the Fairy of Poison, so how could she possibly have a male voice? Besides, her entire soul had dissipated in that tragic battle back then, so it is impossible for her to have left a fragment of her soul in a Seven Hearts Lotus. No doubt about it, he is definitely a fake. Our founder is a woman?" Ruo Qingyuan was taken aback. There were indeed many stories regarding the founder of the Poison Hall going around, but honestly speaking, he was indeed unsure whether the other party was a male or a female. "Indeed. I haven't really read any books regarding our founder, but I heard it from an 8-star poison master before. It is said that there is also sculpture of her created by her disciple in the headquarters." To possess a male body and speak in a male voice at that, there is no doubt about it. He is definitely a fake. Poison Master Hai said grimly. But the Emerald Serenity Jaundice poison was indeed ineffective against him. Furthermore, his body possesses inconceivable immunity towards poison as well. An elder couldn't help but exclaim. As formidable as the Emerald Serenity Jaundice poison is, there are still many ways that one can neutralize it. For example, I have a heavenly aroma detoxification pill here left behind by an 8-star poison master. Once consumed, one will gain perfect immunity to any grade 7 poison and below. Poison Master Bai replied. Besides, there are also many medicinal herbs and plants in nature that possesses the ability to neutralize poison. Putting everything aside, the body saint tree of the Hongyuan Empire royal family can bear a body fruit, which when consumed, grants one near-perfect immunity to poison of grade 7 and below, and this is including poisons directed to the soul too. This. Ruo Qingyuan was taken aback. They were both 7-star poison masters, but the other party were from the headquarters, and their eye of discernment and knowledge were beyond him. So, you are saying that he is very likely to be a fraud? The elder from before asked with a deep frown. That is not necessarily so. There are some parts to the story which I am still unable to make sense of. Despite being at nascent saint, that fellow already possesses strength which none of you are able to rival. On top of that, for him to be completely fine after being bitten from your dark gold venom beetle and even poison them to death at that is a feat beyond my means as well. Most likely the other party is on par with an 8-star poison master at minimum, but if that is truly the case, there would be no need for the other party to make up such lies. Poison Master Bai shook his head. He felt that there was something amiss with that Sun Qiong fellow saying that the founder had possessed his body, but there were still various aspects to the matter which he couldn't make sense of it to refute the other party's claim entirely. What was the most bewildering was that the other party actually had no request whatsoever. If the other party was intending to pull off something, he would have already attempted to use his standing to force the poison hall to comply with his commands. It was impossible that he would feign that he was the founder of the poison hall just to read some book. You said that the Sun Qiong person is still in the compendium hall at the moment. After some contemplation, Poison Master Bai was still unable to make sense of the situation. Thus, after some contemplation, a glint flickered across his eyes, and he said, "Why don't I help you test his mastery of poison? If he's truly the founder, he should be fine after it. Otherwise, for feigning the founder, he deserves death." This. Ruo Qingyuan hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right. Chapter 1006, Poison Master Bai visits. Walking into the compendium hall, Zhongxian shook his head helplessly. It was not that he wanted to disguise himself as the founder of the poison hall, but the situation back then had left him with no other choice. If he hadn't said that, Elder Shu might very well have lost his life. At the same time, he would have also fallen out completely with the poison hall, never to reconcile with one another. While it was wrong for him to have fooled the other party like that, at the very least, he did manage to resolve the problem perfectly. Not only so, he had even been given access to the compendium hall as well. Speaking of disguising as the founder of the poison hall, it was really fortunate he had the Violet Leaf King's button of disguise with him. It was due to such an artifact that he had been able to disguise vicious powerful killing intent as the aura of a powerful human, making Ruo Qingyuan and the others not dare to doubt him. Otherwise, everyone would immediately have realized that Vicious was an otherworldly demon, and instead of instilling deference into them, he would only have further worsened the conflict. However, the effects of the button of disguise were still rather lacking as compared to that of Kong Shi's writing. It was sufficient to fool a poison master, but it would have been hard to do the same before the discerning eyes of a master teacher. But still, they will probably figure it out soon enough. I should quickly finish reading through my books first. While Zhongxian did manage to scare the others for the time being, there were many parts of his story that didn't make sense if one were to think deeper into it. The urgent matter at hand was for him to quickly finish reading the books. As soon as he found a way to resolve Wei Ruyan's condition, he would be able to leave the poison hall. This way, the matter could be resolved entirely. With such thoughts in mind, Zhongxian proceeded on to the 4th floor without any hesitation. The books on this floor was clearly fewer than that in the 3rd floor. However, the content harnessed within them was far more profound, reaching the level of a 4-star poison master and beyond. Scanning his gaze over the rows of bookshelves, Zhongxian collected the books into his library of Heaven's Path and converted them into his own knowledge. The more books he collected, the deeper his understanding of poison became. Within less than 2 hours, he finished reading through everything on that floor. Thus, he moved on to the 5th floor. The books on the 5th floor was targeted toward 5-star poison masters, and the number of books was significantly smaller than that of the previous floor once more. Within less than an hour, Zhongxian had already managed to collect everything in the room. Still nothing at all. After scanning through the books on the 5th floor but still finding no useful news regarding the innate poison body, Zhongxian couldn't help but panic. There were only 7 floors to the compendium hall, and being at the 5th, he had already covered more than half of the knowledge harnessed in there. Yet, there was still no clue whatsoever. Could it be that the solution to the innate poison body couldn't be found here either? If that was the case, it would truly be a calamity. While Wei Ruyan's condition was still stable at the moment, there was no knowing if she could hold on long enough for Zhongxian to take her to a higher-ranked poison hall. Knowing that it was pointless to panic, Zhongxian rubbed his glabella in distress before moving on. Forget it, I should just continue for now. If there is still nothing after I go through the last 2 floors, I will just have to think of another solution. The books on the 6th floor numbered less than 10,000. Zhongxian walked slowly along the bookshelves, taking in everything in sight. Just as he had finally finished taking everything in and was just about to head to the next floor, the door to the room abruptly opened, and a figure walked in. The other party was an old man who seemed to be in his 60s. He had a snowy white beard and wrinkly face, but his eyes had a sharp glint, reminiscent of an eagle. His clothes were plain and unimpressive, and he didn't don a poison master emblem on his chest, making it impossible to determine his rank. Shaking his head, Zhongxian paid the other party no heed and headed straight for the stairs toward the 7th floor. At that moment, however, Zhongxian abruptly heard Vicious' voice in his mind. Master, that person is even stronger than Ruo Qingyuan. His cultivation has most likely reached Saint 4 Dan. Saint 4 Dan? A 7-star poison master? Zhongxian was taken aback. Wasn't the strongest man in the Hongyuan Empire poison hall Ruo Qingyuan? Considering that Ruo Qingyuan was only at Saint 3 Dan himself, where in the world did this Saint 4 Dan pop out from? At Saint 4 Dan, the other party possessed might that was comparable to the Violet Leaf King. That's right. He might have concealed his cultivation well, but there is no way he can fool my eyes, Vicious said discreetly. After swallowing the primordial spirit of the Waterleaf King, Vicious had recovered yet another portion of his cultivation, allowing him to see through the old man without the other party noticing his presence. Frowning deeply, Zhongxian suddenly felt extremely wary of the old man before him. For a Saint 4 Dan to walk in here abruptly. What is he up to? Zhongxian was considering whether or not he should toss the Violet Leaf King and otherworldly demon puppets out to take the initiative and preemptively subdue the other party when he suddenly thought of something, and he came to a halt. For an expert of the other party's caliber to appear here, there was no way the other party was here to read books or to roam around. No doubt about it, the other party was here to find him. The reason the other party walked around the area instead of making a move on him directly showed that the other party wasn't intending on provoking him. Instead, the other party was trying to sound him out, possibly out of doubt of what he had just said. If the other party was only attempting to sound him out, there would be no need for him to bring the Violet Leaf King out. Otherwise, if he created a huge ruckus, he would only undo all the effort he had just put into appeasing the poison hall. On top of that, if the books on the 7th floor were to be destroyed in the midst of the fight, he would only be making things even more difficult for himself. A Saint 4 Dan expert has already forged his primordial spirit, so it won't be that easy for me to fool him. Naturally, it would be best if Zhongxian could resolve this issue silently. However, there was no way fooling an expert as powerful as the other party could be an easy task. His claim that he possessed the poison soul constitution was backed by the fact that he had been able to survive the Emerald Serenity jaundice poison, making Ruo Qingyuan and the others unable to doubt him. However, such a trick wouldn't work on a primordial spirit realm expert. One who possessed a primordial spirit could peer into the soul of another directly to assess it. Zhong Xian had only gained considerable immunity to poison due to the exchange of soul essence with Wei Ruyan. He didn't possess the real poison soul constitution. Thus, if the other party were to check his soul, it was very possible that he could be exposed. Thus, the most important matter at hand was for him to prevent the other party from checking his primordial soul. But how could this be done? While Zhong Xian was in deep thought, the old man was also assessing him with a deep gaze. The middle-aged man in front of him was indeed only a nascent saint cultivator. There was nothing particularly special about him, and his appearance was also so, perhaps looking a little repulsive even. It was truly a wonder to him how Ruo Qingyuan and the others had been fooled so easily, entirely convinced that the other party carried the soul of the founder within him. Just as the old man was just about to speak, the fellow before him abruptly rushed forward, heading toward a shelf of books. The old man frowned. Could it be that the other party had noticed that he was concealing his cultivation, and feeling threatened, he was trying to escape as far as he could? If that was the case, it would truly be a disaster. Furthermore, judging from the speed, if the other party were to really crash into the shelf, the books might just be utterly destroyed under the impact. Those books were the crystallization of the knowledge of countless preceding poison masters in the poison hall, so how could he allow them to be destroyed before his eyes? With a grim look, the old man drove his cultivation as he rushed forward, preparing to grab the other party to stop him. However, the other party abruptly came to a halt right before the bookshelf. The next moment, he sat down on the floor and began meditating, seemingly going into a state of cultivation. Cultivation? The old man was bewildered. It was just a moment ago that the other party had rushed forward as if a lunatic, seemingly intent on destroying the books before him. Yet, the next moment, he had abruptly sat down to cultivate. How could a person be so fickle-minded? The old man was Poison Master Bai Ting from the headquarters. After learning that the person who had impersonated the founder was currently in the compendium hall, he had ordered Ruo Qingyuan and the others to guard outside while he made his way in alone. Just as he was thinking about how he should sound the fellow sitting on the floor out, a calm voice suddenly came from the other party. "What do you see?" Bewildered by the sudden words, Poison Master Bai glanced either side of him, and after confirming that there was no one else around, he confusedly pointed a finger at himself and asked, "Are you talking to me?" The middle-aged man before him nodded. Uncomprehending of what the other party was driving at, Poison Master Bai hesitated for a moment before replying. "Other than books, I don't think that there is anything else here." They were in the compendium hall, so naturally, there were only books and bookshelves around them. What other answer was the other party expecting to hear? The middle-aged man before him sighed woefully, seemingly disappointed by the answer he had received. "I thought that a 7-star pinnacle poison master, a Saint 4 Dan cultivator, might have a different view than the others. But from the looks of it, you are no different from them." Why you can see through my cultivation?" Poison Master Bai narrowed his eyes in shock, unable to believe what he was hearing. He had concealed his cultivation, and he hadn't brought his emblem with him either. On the surface, he was no different from an ordinary 6-star poison master. Yet, the other party was able to see through him despite having his back against him. This was truly a little hard for him to believe. Merely Saint 4 Dan, what is there not to see through? Harumphing coldly, the middle-aged man looked at the bookshelves before him with his eyes closed and said meaningfully, "These aren't books but knowledge. However, it is a pity that the writers have twisted my heritage into something so unseemly." "Your heritage?" Poison Master Bai frowned. "Yuan," the middle-aged man nodded lightly before sighing deeply once more. "Do you know why you are unable to achieve a breakthrough despite having remained at 7-star pinnacle for so long? The star-weaving art is indeed a powerful cultivation technique, but it is a pity that an accident you made in the midst of concocting poison has resulted in the complete sealing of one of the Yuanshan acupoints. As a result, you aren't able to knock it open no matter how you try." Truly, a pity. Why you know that I cultivate the star-weaving art? Poison Master Bai's body stiffened in astonishment. He had come here to sound the other party out, but, before he could say a word, the other party had already uncovered his secrets. It was no wonder he was horrified. The star-weaving art that he cultivated had been created by an 8-star poison master. Back when he was younger, he had obtained it coincidentally during a mission. He had thought that with such a powerful cultivation technique in hand, he would surely be able to advance to become an 8-star poison master very soon. He had never thought that he would end up being trapped at 7-star pinnacle for several centuries. As for the reason he was unable to make an advancement even after such a long time, it was exactly as the other party had said. A mistake he had made in the midst of concocting poison had ended up harming his foundation, resulting in his Yuanshan acupoint being sealed. No matter how hard he tried to break it open, it simply wouldn't budge. It didn't work even when he was younger, and to date, he was only 100 years or so away from the end of his lifespan. Most likely, a breakthrough in his lifetime was impossible. This was something that he had hidden deep within his heart, never sharing it with anyone. Even Poison Master Hai, the other envoy who had accompanied him here, wasn't aware of it. Yet, the middle-aged man before him was actually able to see through it in an instant. Such an eye of discernment. Could the other party really be the founder? After all, not even an 8-star poison master possessed such sharp eyes. The core of the star-weaving art lies in its breathing technique. Breathing reminiscent of weaving, guided by the stars. With the poison serving as the nourishment and the stars as the medium, the intent is to weave one's zhenqi through one's body like a thread. Yet, you chose to scatter the thread across your entire body, eventually resulting in the sealing of your Yuanshan acupoint. It will truly be a miracle if you successfully achieve a breakthrough. Shaking his head in disappointment, the middle-aged man sighed deeply, seemingly lamenting over the mistakes made by a junior who had gone astray. With cold sweat trickling down his head, Poison Master Bai was at a loss for words. To be able to tell the problems in his cultivation with a glance and point out the core of the star-weaving technique. This was no longer something that could be explained with just eye of discernment. One had to have an inconceivably deep understanding of the way of poison in order to achieve this. Even the hall master of the branch he was in was incapable of achieving this feat. Paying no heed to the other party's shock, the middle-aged man continued. There is no need to get anxious. Truthfully, despite the failure in the concoction of your poison and your mistaken interpretation of your cultivation technique, your Yuanshan acupoint still shouldn't have been sealed so tightly. If I am not mistaken, the reason your cultivation has stagnated entirely is due to a betrayal from someone, am I right? You. In that instant, Poison Master Bai's eyes nearly plopped onto the ground. Unable to retain his composure and bearings as a 7-star poison master any longer, he stuttered, how did you know? Chapter 1007, Beguiling Poison Master Bai. Back when Poison Master Bai was younger, he had indeed suffered the betrayal from another. It was a brother whom he had trusted deeply. Plagued with envy after learning about the existence of the star-weaving art, the other party had discreetly switched a medicinal herb that he had prepared for the concoction of an extremely difficult pill, resulting in him being severely wounded in the affair. Not only so, the other party had even assaulted him while he was at a crucial stage in his cultivation, and that incident had nearly left him dead. Even though he had exacted vengeance after he recovered, poisoning that wretched scoundrel to death with his own hands, the damage caused to his body was already irreparable. It was due to such a wound that he had been trapped at the primordial spirit realm for so long, unable to achieve a breakthrough. This matter had become a huge regret in his life. It was also due to this incident that he had remained guarded toward everyone before him, never daring to let loose before anyone for fear of being betrayed once more. So how did the middle-aged man before him learn of the matter? When you made a move against me earlier, your zhenqi stopped right before your Yunmen 1 acupoint. This shows that there is a blockage there that you are unable to pass through. That acupoint isn't a particularly difficult one to break open, and for a condition like yours to occur, it typically means that one has been injured in the past or that he is suffering from a mental trauma. Without opening his eyes, the middle-aged man continued speaking calmly. As for your inability to achieve a breakthrough, while you did conceal your primordial spirit well, I can still see it as clear as day. It is extremely powerful, and under normal circumstances, you should have been able to draw it out from your body long ago to soar into the skies. Yet, there isn't the slightest hint of Zhenqi in your Yuanshan acupoint. This suggests that your Yuanshan acupoint is tightly sealed. At the same time, the Zhenqi flowing through your body is very distinctive, possessing a thread-like form. Given all that, it wasn't too difficult for me to deduce the entire story. Just by driving my Zhenqi a bit, you were able to tell so much? Poison Master Bai felt his throat running dry. As a Saint Four Dan Pinnacle expert, he had seen plenty of people who possessed astounding eye of discernment and powerful means that weren't beneath those of a 7-star master teacher at all. But, to be able to see through so much in just an instant, that was completely unbelievable. He had never seen something like this before. More importantly, the other party had never opened his eyes throughout the entire process, keeping his back toward him. This wasn't something that could be described as frightening anymore, it was horrifying. It doesn't matter how I see through it, the issue is you. The reason you are unable to achieve a breakthrough is due to your lack of confidence. Without confidence, nothing else will fall in place. How about this? Since you are a 7-star pinnacle poison master, your ability to utilize and discern poison shouldn't be too bad. Let me give you a test. At this point, the middle-aged man chuckled softly, and who? A gourd slowly floated over toward the poison master Bai. Look and see if there is poison in here. In here? Perplexed, poison master Bai uncorked the gourd, and an aromatic fragrance gushed toward him. He extended his spiritual perception into the gourd, and a moment later, he shook his head and said, "It doesn't have any poison." Through checking with his spiritual perception, he could tell that even though the wine did contain a higher concentration of spiritual energy, it didn't contain any poison. "Do you dare have a sip?" the middle-aged man asked. This. Hearing those words, Poison Master Bai froze. He could confirm that the wine in the gourd wasn't poisoned, but he was still fearful to drink it. To doubt even your own judgment, how far can you reach with such a state of mind? It seems like, that is all there is to a 7-star pinnacle poison master. The middle-aged man shook his head in disappointment. On the other hand, Poison Master Bai's face reddened in shame. You might think that your greatest problem came from your friend's betrayal, but that isn't really so. What that is truly limiting you is your inability to trust even yourself. Whenever you saw your Yuanshan acupoint firmly shut even after several attempts to knock it open, you decided for yourself that it is impossible to succeed and chose to give up. Without the confidence to persevere and take the final step, how can you achieve greater heights? The middle-aged man asked. Poison Master Bai was rendered speechless. The other party was right. Due to that matter, he had become deeply suspicious of others. As time passed, his suspicions deepened, and eventually, he even began to doubt himself. Since you have already confirmed that there is no poison, why won't you drink it? Do you fear that your judgment isn't accurate, or do you fear death? The middle-aged man said deeply. Facing the other party's questions, Poison Master Bai's face paled as his body trembled uncontrollably. A moment later, he raised his head and looked at the other party earnestly. "Elder, what should I do?" Regardless of whether it was the other party's eye of discernment or understanding of poison, they were far superior to his. Even if the other party wasn't the founder, there was no doubt that the other party was his senior in the way of poison. Thus, there was nothing wrong with calling the other party elder. You need to break the shackles of doubt in you. With a high and mighty attitude, the middle-aged man spoke affirmatively. You need to trust your own judgment and drink this gourd of wine. This is the only way for you to vanquish the doubt you have in yourself. Hearing those words, Poison Master Bai hesitated. But a moment later, he clenched his jaws tightly and nodded. Indeed. If I have deemed the wine in the gourd to be devoid of poison, what do I have to fear? Since he had already affirmed it himself, why shouldn't he drink it? Even if he were to be poisoned, he still had the heavenly aroma detoxification pill with him. That should suffice to deal with everything. With such thoughts in mind, he uncorked the gourd without any hesitation, and Gudong, Gudong, he drank several large mouthfuls of wine. In that instant, he felt everything he had suppressed deep in his heart being liberated all of a sudden, and a look of delight surfaced on his face. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Excellent wine." Due to the betrayal he had suffered once, he didn't trust any outsiders or even himself at that. Such a problem had plagued him for the longest of time, but at this instant, he felt like he had been saved by the other party's gourd of fine wine. "Elder, thank you for your advice." Poison Master bowed deeply. Regardless of whom the other party was, he was still thankful to the other party for dispelling his inner demons. "Do you believe that I am your founder now?" the middle-aged man asked. "I." Poison Master Bai was immediately sank into an awkward position. The reason for his arrival there was to investigate the other party's identity. Yet, he had been exposed from the moment that he stepped through the door, rendering everything he had planned futile. "Elder, both your eye of discernment and understanding of poisons are things that I am unable to match. However, it is still very difficult for me to believe that the soul of the founder is in you. On top of that, this matter has huge implications as well. If it is convenient for you, can you allow me to use my primordial spirit to peer into your soul? Once I confirm that you possess the poison soul constitution, I will kowtow and ask for your forgiveness." Poison Master Bai hesitated for a moment before saying. He was already 80% convinced that the other party was the founder, but he still needed to verify it directly in order to dispel his doubts. After all, he knew for a fact that the founder was a lady, and the person before him was indubitably a male. Instead of responding to his question, the middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "The innate poison body is also known as the constitution of disaster. Wherever one went, lethal poison followed. You should have heard of this matter before." "Yes." Poison Master Bai nodded. As a 7-star pinnacle poison master, he was naturally aware of the various details concerning the innate poison body. The constitution of disaster did grant one perfect immunity to poison, but if it wasn't suppressed properly, lethal poison will leak from one's body, bringing great disaster upon one's surroundings. I might just be a fragmented soul, but the essence of my constitution remains. Even though Sun Qiong, whom I have deposited my soul in, does possess a strong aptitude toward poison, he is still unable to contain the prowess of my soul. As a result, the moment I entered this room, it became permeated with lethal poison. Naturally, you were also poisoned the moment you stepped in as well, the middle-aged man said. Poison Master Bai was taken aback. Poisoned? When he assessed the wine in the gourd using his spiritual perception earlier, he had also caught a glimpse of the surroundings. There was clearly no poisonous air or powder in the area. Besides, if he had really been poisoned, how could he possibly be unaware of the matter? He didn't feel anything at all, so how could he have been poisoned just like that? "You don't believe me?" The middle-aged man chuckled softly. "It is not that I don't trust Elder, but I have spent my entire life around poisons, and I don't think that there is poison in here." Poison Master Bai assessed the surroundings once more and shook his head. "You don't think that there is poison here?" The middle-aged man burst into laughter before eventually sighing. If the poison aura emanated by the innate poison body could be discovered by another that easily, how could I have become the founder of the Poison Hall, initiating an occupation that even Kongsha was fearful of? After saying those words, the middle-aged man snapped his fingers. "Pada." Right after the sound echoed around the room, Poison Master Bai suddenly felt his entire body stiffening up. It felt as if a lethal poison that had lain dormant in his body all along was coming to life under the other party's control. His face paled, and a mouthful of blood spurted from his mouth. Horror and fear were reflected in his eyes. He had been proceeding carefully ever since he entered the room, so how could he have been poisoned? Could it be that, just as the other party said, those who possessed the innate poison body would cause a calamity wherever they went, and even poison masters were no exception to the rule as well? After retracting his poison, the middle-aged man asked nonchalantly, "Do you believe me now?" I believe you." Poison Master Bai nodded vehemently. If he'd still had his reservations a moment ago, at this point, he no longer had any doubts. As a 7-star pinnacle poison master, he actually didn't even realize it when he was already fatally poisoned. Without a doubt, The other party's ability to utilize poison was far above his. More importantly, he could sense that the poison had seeped into even the narrowest of acupoints in his body. Therefore, there was no way he could dispel it, not even with the heavenly aroma detoxification pill he had in his possession, to remain unaware despite being fatally poisoned and completely helpless before it after learning of the matter. This was the fearsome power that one of those possessing the innate poison body harness. 7-Star Poison Master by Ting pays respect to the founder. Having confirmed the matter, there was no longer any need for Bai Ting to ascertain the other party's identity through his primordial spirit anymore, and he dared not do so either. He hurriedly kneeled on the ground and paid his respect to the other party. Rise. The middle-aged man waved his hand. Naturally, the middle-aged man was Zhong Xian, who was disguised as Sun Qiong at the moment. Knowing that the fellow before him was a Saint 4 Dan pinnacle expert, he knew that it was impossible for him to make the other party submit with just a few words. Furthermore, if the other party were to still doubt him after he had explained himself and attempt to assault him while he was unguarded, there was a good chance that he might have been killed before he could even bring the Violet Leaf King out. For his own safety, he felt that he had to poison the other party first. Thus, he intentionally feigned that he was knocking into the bookshelves so as to lure the other party to driving his zhenqi. Through doing so, he could use the Library of Heaven's path to determine the other party's flaws and use his sharp tongue to scare the other party. In a shocked state, it was inevitable that one would be unable to make the most rational of decisions. Through exploiting the weakness in the other party's heart, he was able to convince the other party to drink the wine. As for everything else about the innate poison body he had mentioned earlier, they were all lies. Even though Wei Ruyan possessed the innate poison body, due to the limitations of her cultivation, it was difficult for her to even kill a Saint Realm expert, let alone a Saint 4 Dan expert like the other party. Needless to say, Zhong Xian didn't possess such a mystical ability either. The reason the other party had been poisoned was due to the gourd of wine that the other party had drunk earlier. Of course, until Poison Master Bai had an opportunity to think this matter over, it wasn't too difficult for Zhong Xian to mislead the other party into believing that he had been poisoned due to prolonged contact with the innate poison body. As a result of that, the other party would fear him and not dare to pull anything before him. Seeing that he had managed to win the other party over, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. After a short moment of contemplation, he said, "As a result of the fragmentation of my soul, my strength is far from what it used to be, and I have lost most of my memory as well. I am unable to contain the poison aura within me any longer, and there is a good chance that it might act up very soon. Are you aware of any solutions to resolving this problem?" Chapter 1008, Wei Ruyan's treatment method. Even after reading to the 6th floor, Zhong Xian was still unable to find a solution for Wei Ruyan's innate poison body. According to the introduction on Poison Master Bai in the Library of Heaven's Path, it was reflected that the other party was a 7-star pinnacle poison master from the headquarters. Given so, the other party had access to knowledge greater than what was contained in this Hongyuan Empire poison hall, so he might know some secrets regarding the matter. Besides, it was normal for a soul to suffer from memory loss if it were to be fragmented or exist for too long. Putting aside everything else, Vicious was in the same state as well. This point would serve to bring greater credibility to his argument, making it easier for him to win the trust of the other party. And as expected, upon hearing those words, Poison Master Bai suddenly had an epiphany. Nodding, he contemplated for a brief moment before saying, "I have heard of those possessing the innate poison body losing control of their strength and bringing calamity on the world before. However, I am not too sure how it can be suppressed either. However, Poison Master Hai has read some related materials, so he might know a thing or two about the matter." Poison Master Hai? Zhong Xian was stunned. Could it be that the other party wasn't the only envoy from the headquarters? The Library of Heaven's Path could only reflect the flaws of the individual which it came into contact with. As Poison Master Hai had never entered the Compendium Hall, Zhong Xian had no chance to learn of the other party's existence either. "Poison Master Hai is my companion who has accompanied here. He is a 7-star pinnacle poison master as well, and he has read many books regarding you. Perhaps He might have a solution towards this problem. Poison Master Bai explained. How many people from the headquarters have come here with you? Zhong Xian couldn't help but ask. It's just the both of us. Poison Master Bai dared not lie to the founder of the Poison Hall. Just the both of you? Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief internally. If it was only the both of them, this matter would still be under his control. He had already beguiled one over, so as long as he were to push a little harder, he should be able to win the trust of the other easily too. After a moment of hesitation, Zhong Xian whipped out a gourd of fine wine and passed it over. Invite him here. Tell him that this gourd of wine is a treat from me. You are treating Poison Master Hai to a drink. Poison Master Bai was perplexed. Indeed. There are some medicinal herbs contained within the medicine which might prove useful to you all in furthering your cultivation. Zhong Xian nodded with an empathetic look, seemingly showing earnest concern for his junior. It is useful in furthering one's cultivation? Then why would I? Poison Master Bia was taken aback. Are you wondering why the wine is ineffective on you even though you have drunk it? Seemingly seeing through the other party thoughts, Zhong Xian said. This. Having his thoughts pointed out, Poison Master Bai's face flushed in embarrassment. He had already drunk the wine, but he hadn't felt any boost in his cultivation at all. However, as a junior, he wasn't in a position to question the other party's decisions. All medicinal herbs only work upon reaching a certain dosage. You have only drunk 2 mouthfuls, so naturally, the effects on you are minimal. As long as you drink a few more mouthfuls, the effects will become apparent to you. Smiling, Zhong Xian adopted an unfathomable image. Drink a few more mouthfuls. Poison Master Bai was taken aback for a moment before nodding in agreement. Indeed. Most medicinal herbs only worked their wonders after reaching a certain dosage. Considering that Zhong Xian had only drunk 2 mouthfuls, it was inevitable that the effects would be not apparent. With such thoughts in mind, he raised the wine gourd, which the other party had passed him a moment ago, and lifted it up. Gudong. Gudong. The other party drank more than a dozen mouthfuls. For one of their cultivation realm, as long as they didn't intend to get drunk, ordinary alcohol were ineffective on them. After drinking, Poison Master Bai closed his eyes. As expected, a surge of warm energy began flowing out from his abdomen, headed towards his Yuanshan acupoint. For several centuries, he had used all kinds of methods to attempt to break open his Yuanshan acupoint, only for his efforts to end in futility eventually. At this moment, when he felt the surge of warm energy flowing over, he began drawing the strength within his body towards the Yuanshan acupoint too. With a light knock, Jia, the seal on his Yuanshan acupoint actually shook. This. Poison Master Bai's breathing hastened, and he nearly leaped up in agitation. For someone of his level of cultivation, it was apparent what the shaking meant. The seal of his Yuanshan acupoint was loosening. In other words, as long as he were to persevere on in the future, there might be a chance that he would be able to knock it open. To think that a gourd of fine wine would actually achieve what his centuries of effort was unable to do, wasn't this wine a little too formidable? Is it effective? Chuckling softly, Zhong Xian spoke in a leisurely yet unfathomable voice. Thank you, Founder. Poison Master Bai replied in agitation, awed by what he had just experienced. After feeling the benefits the fine wine had towards him personally, he harbored no longer any doubts towards the gourd of wine anymore. All right, you can leave now. I will be heading to the 7th floor now. Have Poison Master Hai drink the wine and look for me later on. Seeing that he had won the other party's trust, Zhong Xian waved his hands casually and dismissed the other party. Yes. Hurriedly nodding, Poison Master Bai left excitedly. To him, this journey had brought him great rewards. Not only was he able to ascertain Sun Qiong's real identity, he was even able to reignite his confidence and obtain a mystical gourd of wine from the founder which could very well become the key for him to achieve a breakthrough in the future. After sensing that the other party had left, Zhong Xian waited for a moment longer before opening his eyes and standing up. Beguiling a 7-star pinnacle poison master was no easy task, but it was fortunate that everything had gone smoothly. The reason why he was able to fool the other party wasn't because the other party was too foolish, but that the effects of the library of Heaven's Path and Heaven's Pathshanchi were simply too inconceivable, and Zhongxian had utilized them perfectly to catch the other party off guard. On top of that, disguise had always been his forte. If he wished to, not even a 7-star master teacher could see through his disguise. Fooling a 7-star poison master wasn't anything much in comparison. All right, hurry in. Knowing that it would take some time before Poison Master Hai arrived, Zhongxian decided to head straight for the 7th floor to gather the books first. The books on the 7th floor were clearly much fewer, consisting of around a few thousand books. With a quick sweep of his gaze through the room, he collected all of them into his head. After which, he sat onto the floor and began scanning through all of the books he had just collected. Not too long later, he shook his head with disappointment on his face. There were at least a dozen books which had records on the innate poison body, but they were extremely vague. Most of them only elaborated on how powerful the constitution was, but there was nothing about how one could control the poison aura and prevent it from leaking into the surroundings. In other words, even after reading all of the books, he still hadn't found a solution to resolving Wei Ruyan's present condition. It seems like it will be impossible for me to find a solution directly through the records. I will just have to research it on my own. Even though Zhongxian was disappointed, they didn't despair. With all of the books regarding poison in the Library of Heaven's Path, there was no doubt that his comprehension of poison could reach at least 7-star pinnacle after he studied all of them, putting him on par or even beyond Poison Master Bai. With such deep mastery in the way of poisons, he would be able to deduce plausible treatment methods for Wei Ruyan's condition. But of course, to internalize all of the knowledge he had learnt and raise his understanding of poison from 3-star to 7-star, it would take several hours. Before then, he should listen to whatever Poison Master Hai had to say first. Thus, Zhongxian sat down and began to wait. Not too long later, Poison Master Bai returned with an old man following behind him. The old man was even taller than Poison Master Bai, and the aura around him was overwhelming. He was a powerful Saint 4 Dan Pinnacle expert as well. At this moment, the other party was looking at him deferentially, without much of a doubt in his eyes. Most likely, he must have already heard about the matter from Poison Master Bai. It seemed like the other party had deep trust in Poison Master Bai's judgment. This was definitely for the best. He would be spared from the effort of putting on another act to convince the other party to submit to him. Walking up to Zhongxian, Poison Master Hai bowed deeply and said, "I have indeed read on a book that those possessing the innate poison body can bring disaster to those around them, and vaguely, I recall seeing the treatment method for the issue on the same book as well. The treatment will require the cooperation of many poison masters. A unique formation will be set up to convert the poison aura accumulated within the host's body into energy which one could utilize to achieve a breakthrough. If the treatment were to succeed, not only would the host be able to resolve the threats of the innate poison body, one would also be able to advance one's cultivation by leaps and bounds. Unique formation. Zhongxian frowned. Do you know what kind of formation it is? I am not too sure about it myself either. However, those of the headquarters are bound to have heard of it. Also, if I were to recall correctly, the collaboration of 8-star and even 9-star poison masters would be required in driving the formation, Poison Master Hai said with a frown on his forehead. The collaboration of 8-star and 9-star poison masters. Zhongxian's complexion darkened as a dark shadow gloomed over his eyes. Putting aside the fact that he had nowhere to find such powerful poison masters, even if he were to find one, there was no way he would be able to beguile the other party into helping him given his current strength. What founder or that sort, those were all nonsense. It was only through using the information detailed in the Library of Heaven's Path that he was able to induce Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai to believe in him. Such a method wouldn't work on true experts, no matter how well his acting was. Yes. Poison Master Hai nodded. Only a poison master of that caliber would be able to gather the poison aura emanated by the innate poison body and complement it with various poisons so as to concoct it into something that could raise the host's cultivation swiftly. Once the process succeeds, breakthroughs will become as easy as drinking water, and the day that you return to your peak state won't be too far away as well. Zhongxian nodded. Even though he hadn't internalized all of the books in the Library of Heaven's Path yet, he had already browsed through all of the books regarding the innate poison body amongst them, granting him a deeper understanding of the matter. With the steady consumption of poison, those possessing the innate poison body would find it harder and harder to suppress the poison aura within their body. However, if there were poison masters in the area who could gather all of her poison aura together and refine it with various medicinal herbs, it could indeed become a powerful force that would allow one to achieve breakthroughs at an astounding pace. At this point, Poison Master Hai suddenly looked at Zhongxian hesitantly and asked, "Founder, are you intending on using this body to regain your strength? What's wrong?" Noticing the peculiar edge in the other party's tone, Zhongxian frowned. "It's nothing much, but, Founder, aren't you a female? Why are you using a male body instead?" Poison Master Hai said awkwardly. "Female?" Zhongxian was stunned. He knew that the founder of the Poison Hall did possess the innate poison body, but thinking back, he had indeed never heard whether the other party was a male or a female. No wonder Poison Master Bai would doubt his identity. Wait, if the founder of the Poison Hall is truly a female, this will make things even more convenient for me. A thought flashed across Zhongxian's mind, and his body began trembling in agitation. Previously, he had been thinking about how he could bring Wei Ruyan into the picture without incurring the other party's doubts. However, if the founder was a female, this would make things convenient for him. With a light chuckle, Zhongxian glanced at the duo. Even though his eyes were closed, Poison Master Hai still felt as if there were a sharp pair of eyes gazing on him. "I am indeed a female. It is out of no choice that I ended up depositing my soul on Sun Qiong's body. However, I have already found a body that complements my soul perfectly. However, due to certain circumstances, I will lose consciousness once I enter the body, thus losing control of the power in my body as well. This is the reason why I came to the Poison Hall in seek of help." "You have found a body that complements your soul?" Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai glanced at one another, surprised by what they had just heard. "Indeed. Not only so, my soul is currently very weak. Once I were to possess the body, it is very likely that I will lose all memories. Unless I were to return back to my peak state, otherwise the other party will still be the leading consciousness. As such, I have been hesitating, not daring to make a move easily." Zhongxian sighed. The two poison masters frowned deeply. They had never thought that there would be such extenuating circumstances surrounding this matter. However, considering how their founder's soul had suffered the batter of time for several dozen millenniums, it wouldn't come as a surprise regardless whatever state it was in. Chapter 1009, Making Arrangements for Wei Ruyan. Actually, it does not matter whether you are able to return to the body of a female or not, Poison Master Bai persuaded. As long as one was able to continue living, what did gender matter? Besides, there were plenty of poison masters in the Poison Hall who had their gender mixed up. Zhongxian shook his head. "That's what I thought at the start as well. However, this body is not compatible with my poison soul constitution. At this rate, I will gradually grow weaker, and it won't take long before I am completely dead. Thus, regardless of whether I will lose my memory because of the possession or not, this is something that I will have to do. This is my only opportunity." Based on what Poison Master Hai had said, it was apparent that he would require the help of the Poison Hall headquarters to help resolve Wei Ruyan's condition. However, the Poison Hall was ultimately different from the Master Teacher Pavilion. If he were to send her there without any arrangements beforehand, there was a good chance that things could go awry. After all, the innate poison body was simply too fearsome. It was only a matter of time for a person of such a constitution to rise to the position of the head of the Poison Hall. However, how could the incumbent Hall Master be willing to relinquish his power so easily? In order to prevent any accidents from happening, Zhongxian felt that it would be safer to give her a formidable identity first, the founder of the Poison Hall. With such an identity protecting her, even the incumbent Hall Master would not dare touch her. But of course, it was likely that Wei Ruyan would be unable to follow up with his lie once she woke up, so there was a good chance that she might inadvertently leak the truth. As such, He had made sure to tell them in advance that she would lose her memory. As for the founder's memory returning after returning to her peak state, once Wei Ruyan achieved such strength, whether she had really recovered her memory or not, who would dare to utter a word against her? Knowing that the founder was bound to have a mission for them, considering how the other party had gone through the effort of explaining this matter to them, Poison Master Bai looked at her and asked with a determined glint in his eyes, "Founder, is there anything that you need us to do? As long as it is within our means, the both of us will even brave the fires of hell to accomplish it for you." Poison Master Hai also nodded grimly in agreement. At this moment, Zhong Xian standing in the hearts of the two was comparable to what Kong Shi was in the hearts of the master teachers. To be able to work for her was their greatest pride, and they wouldn't back down even in the face of death. "I don't need you to brave the fires of hell for me. However, I do have something that I need you to help me with." At this point, Zhong Xian paused for a moment as he gazed at the duo before continuing. "I will be moving my soul into the body of a girl I have already prepared beforehand, but as soon as I do that, I will fall into an unconscious state. If it is possible for the both of you, I hope that you can take me back to the Poison Hall headquarters and help me regain my strength as soon as possible. This, Founder, rest assured. We will definitely accomplish it for you." They had been wondering what she would ask for, but upon hearing that this was the other party's request, the two poison masters nodded. If the headquarters were to learn that they had found the founder and brought her back, they would surely be handsomely rewarded for their immense contribution to the Poison Hall. Thus, it could be said that this job was not only not a hassle, it could even be considered a huge opportunity for them. Don't be fooled into thinking that this will be an easy task. But seemingly having seen through their thoughts, Zhong Xian shook his head and said, "After I successfully possess the other party's body, my soul will fall into a coma. This means that I will continuously emit a poisonous aura around me. If you remain in close proximity to me, there is no doubt that you will be heavily poisoned as well." With grim looks on their faces, the duo straightened their posture and swore solemnly, "As long as it is a command from you, we will definitely accomplish it even if death is what we will face." While poison masters were not as concerned with rules and principles as master teachers, they would go to any lengths to protect their lineage and dignity. "Don't worry, you won't face death. I will forge some pills tonight for you to ward off the poisonous aura. Once you feel like you are going to succumb to the poisonous aura, swallow one, and it should be able to neutralize the poisonous aura accumulated in your body thus far." After which, Zhong Xian paused for a brief moment before adding, "Also, I will be imparting an even more profound poison cultivation technique and poison art to you. At the same time, I will think of a way to help the both of you achieve a breakthrough to Saint Five Dan." "Thank you, Founder." With their eyes widening and breathing hastening in agitation, Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai hurriedly clasped their fists and bowed deeply in gratitude. Who was the person before them? The founder of the Poison Hall. The other party was the person who had founded the Poison Hall, leaving behind the heritage of the Poison Masters. For them to actually be so privileged as to receive the guidance from a figure like the other party directly, this was something they could never have dreamed of. There is no need to get happy too early. To obtain my heritage, you will have to acknowledge me as your teacher. Also, in order to ensure that no accidents occur, I will have Sun Chong control your souls. If you intend me any harm, death will fall swiftly upon you." Zhong Xian continued gravely. This was not a matter of whether he trusted the other party or not. He had to ensure that not the slightest harm came to Wei Ruyan. As the saying goes, a layer of skin conceals a human's heart. Furthermore, a constitution as rare as the innate poison body was surely desired by many. Thus, Zhong Xian felt that while it was imperative to offer them some benefits to them to win their loyalty, he had to also prepare some measures to ensure that the other party didn't betray him. Knowing what the founder was worrying over, Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai clasped their fists and declared affirmatively, "Founder, rest assured. Our loyalty toward you is unwavering." Becoming the disciple of the founder was, for a poison master, similar to becoming the disciple of Kong Shi. They would possess a standing above countless poison masters, such that even if they were to encounter 9-star poison masters, the other party would have to behave obediently before them, not daring to offend or disrespect them in the least. There is no need for you to give me your answer that quickly. I will give you some time to consider the matter. You can give me your response at midnight today, said Zhongxian with a casual wave of his hands. This? Yes. The duo glanced at one another before nodding. All right. For the time being, I don't wish for anyone to learn of my matter, so make sure you keep your lips sealed. Otherwise, if the poison on the both of you isn't neutralized in time, I can promise you that you won't live past tomorrow, Zhongxian said with a cold harumph, his voice laced with threat. The two poison masters clasped their fists and replied hurriedly. Founder, rest assured. Not a word of this matter will come from our mouths. You are dismissed. After saying his piece, Zhongxian waved his hand and fell silent. Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai turned around and left. After the both of them left, Zhongxian slowly opened his eyes once more. If the both of them could achieve breakthroughs and become 8-star Poison Masters, Wei Ruyan would be in a much safer position in their care. After sorting out the books in his head and compiling them into the respective Heaven's Path Poison Art manuals, Zhongxian slowly made his way out of the compendium hall. At this moment, Elder Shu, Ruo Qingyuan, and the others were waiting outside. Upon seeing that Zhongxian had left the compendium hall, they hurriedly relayed orders to their men to prepare a banquet to host him. After feasting at the banquet, Zhongxian was shown to a new, grander accommodation. As soon as he was left alone, he entered the myriad ant hive nest and began reading through the Heaven's Path Poison Art. The reason he had told the other party to return at midnight was because he hadn't internalized these books yet. There was no way he could offer guidance to the both of them in his current state. Starting from the 3-star Heaven's Path Poison Art, he gradually moved on to the 4-star, 5-star. Cultivating as he read, his understanding of poison widened and deepened significantly. After some time, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid gas. A sharp but sinister shimmer flickered across Zhongxian's eyes. Immense knowledge regarding poisons ranging from 3-star to 7-star was now imprinted deeply in his brain, becoming his own capability. At this moment, in terms of comprehension of poison, even Poison Master Bai would be no match for him. He might even be a match for some 8-star Poison Masters. Of course, due to his lacking cultivation, it would be impossible for him to take the 8-star Poison Master examination at the moment. In fact, even the 7-star emblem, which Ruo Qingyuan had applied for on his behalf, was only at quasi 7-star. While Poison Master was considered a lower 9 paths occupation, there was still a strict cultivation requirement on rank promotion, just like most upper 9 paths occupations such as Master Teacher and Beast Tamer. To become a real 7-star Poison Master, one's cultivation had to be at Saint 2 Dan Spiritual Perception Realm at the very minimum. To become an 8-star Poison Master, the requirement was for one to possess the cultivation of Saint 5 Dan. This was a fixed requirement, and there was no one who had the authority to alter the rules. However, Zhongxian wasn't bothered by his Poison Master ranking. The main reason the Poison Hall was so strict on the cultivation requirement on rank promotion was due to the risks in concocting higher-grade poisons. Without a sufficiently high cultivation, a Poison Master could very well injure themselves or die as a result of attempting to concoct something beyond their current strength. However, possessing the Heaven's Path Shenqi, Zhongxian was impervious to all poison, so such a problem didn't apply to him. Of course, this didn't mean that cultivation wasn't important to a Poison Master who was impervious to poison. Even if a Poison Master could concoct the most potent poison in the world, if they weren't strong enough to plant the poison on their opponent, it would be futile too. Taking the current Zhongxian for example, the Heaven's Path Shenqi was indubitably an extremely frightening poison. However, to poison a Saint 4 Dan expert to death, he still had to rely on disguising himself and tricking the other party to consume it of their own accord. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to beat his Zhenqi into his opponent's body directly. This was also why it was still very dangerous for him to confront a Saint 4 Dan directly. Just the ability to concoct poison wasn't enough. Being able to utilize it against one's opponent to subdue him was what made a true expert. Despite everything I have learnt, I still cannot come up with a treatment method to resolve Wei Ruyan's condition. However, With my current means, I should still be able to stabilize her condition for around half a year to a year. With this period of time, it should suffice for her to make the journey to the Poison Hall headquarters. Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Even though the Heaven's Path poison art he had compiled from the books in the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall contained incomparably deep and profound knowledge, greatly benefiting him, it still didn't grant him the capability to solve the complications regarding the innate poison body. However, while he was unable to cure the root of the problem, he was more than capable of delaying the worsening of the condition. Standing up, Zhong Xian walked up to Wei Ruyan. He began driving the Heaven's Path Zhenqi in his body, turning it into lethal poison. It was futile to deal with the innate poison body using nourishment medicinal herbs that reinforced one's foundation. The only thing that worked was poison. Back then, Wei Changfeng had been aware of the details regarding the matter, and Wei Ruyan's unique constitution hadn't awakened entirely either, so no one was any wiser about her condition. Out of concern for his daughter's condition, Wei Changfeng had been feeding her all kinds of medicinal herbs ever since she was young, but this had only served to worsen her affliction. Had Wei Ruyan not met him, she would have long succumbed to her affliction. Taking a deep breath, a grim look surfaced in Zhong Xian's eyes. Maneuvering his fingers adept as if he was playing the Peeper One, he nimbly shot surges of his lethal Heaven's Path Zhenqi into each and every acupoints all over Wei Ruyan's body. Shortly after these surges of Zhenqi seeped into Wei Ruyan's body, her pale face began to gradually regain a slightly red glow. Even though she was still unable to regain her consciousness, she was finally in a safe and stable condition, at least in the short term. Knowing that the other party would be fine for around a year, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. With a thought, he drew his soul out of his glabella. Soul guiding art. After which, his massive soul began forming several hand seals, and before long, he succeeded in severing a fragment of his soul. That fragmented soul dove straight into Wei Ruyan's glabella. This student of his had been ill as long as she could remember. Living under the protection of her father's wings, she had an innocent personality that was incapable of scheming against others. If she were to head into the Poison Hall headquarters, a place where even master teachers would tremble in fear before, without any protection, she would surely have a layer of her skin shed at minimum. Thus, after much consideration, Zhong Xian decided to leave a fragment of his soul with the other party to assist her in times of need. After that was done, he fell into deep contemplation once more. He hesitated for a brief moment before eventually taking out the only golden page that he had left. With a tap of his finger, he sent it into the other party's glabella. This was the golden page that had formed when school head Jiang Qingqin acknowledged him as his teacher. All along, he couldn't bring himself to use it. However, if it could be exchanged for the safety of his student, he was more than willing to do so. After doing so, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief before moving his soul back into his physical body. What Zhong Xian had left was just a mindless soul fragment made up purely of intent, on top of which, there had been an exchange of soul essence between the both of them before. As such, Wei Ruyan's body didn't instinctively reject Zhong Xian's soul fragment. It dove into the other party's mind, hiding itself in the depths of the other party's consciousness. Even the strongest of person wouldn't be able to sense the presence of his soul. In fact, as long as Zhong Xian willed it so, this student of his wouldn't be aware of the matter either. The concern that a teacher had for their students need not be made known to the student. The only thing that teachers expected from their students was for them to better themselves, and that was why they could push on despite being misunderstood or unappreciated by their students. As long as their efforts could help the latter and help them achieve greatness, they would feel relieved and gladdened from the bottom of their hearts. This was not foolishness. This was because there was a single belief that was even heavier than the greatest of mountains in the world driving them. They are teachers. Chapter 1010. Death of the Hall Master. Being a teacher was a responsibility, as well as a set of principles that one had sworn to abide by. From the moment he comprehended the heart of the teacher, the true meaning of being a teacher had been imprinted deep in Zhong Xian's mind, and he had never forgotten about it, not even for the briefest moment. And at this point, he had indeed displayed it through his own actions. To his direct disciples, He would impart whatever he felt would benefit them without any reservations. 1. Achieving the true essence of selflessness in teachings. After settling Wei Ruyan, Zhongxian flicked his wrist and took out 2 bottles of foundation-reinforcing nourishment pills. With a tap of his finger, he infused several surges of Heaven's Path Zhenqi into it. Typically speaking, the consumption of these pills shouldn't have any effects on a Saint 4 Dan expert. However, with his Heaven's Path Zhenqi infused into it, it was no longer an ordinary pill. It had become a divine medicine that could cure any injury and neutralize all poisons. Furthermore, as the Zhenqi was deposited into a nourishment pill, it would be nurtured by it, thus allowing to exist for extended periods of time outside of Zhongxian's body without dissipating. This was dissimilar to when he infused his Heaven's Path Zhenqi into a wine gourd. Zhongxian nodded in satisfaction. Each jade bottle has 10 pills. It should be enough for the duo to make the journey to the poison hall and overcome whatever challenges come their way. These pills were prepared for Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai. Since Zhongxian had decided to have them protect Wei Ruyan, he had to ensure that they wouldn't be poisoned to their deaths. After doing all of that, Zhongxian took out an empty book and brush, and wrote out a manual on a simplified version of the Heaven's Path poison art. After which, he contemplated over Poison Master Bai's condition for a moment and tailored a unique formula to resolve the issues the other party was facing. Only then did he finally back out from his ant-hive nest and return to the courtyard of his accommodation. With everything he had been up to, it was already night by the time he returned. Despite the immense quantity of zhenqi he wielded, he still couldn't help but feel exhausted. Sitting on the ground, he drove the Heaven's Path divine art for several cycles before he finally recuperated from his weakness. Shortly after he was done, he heard knocking at his door. It was midnight. "Come in." Right after those words were spoken, Poison Master Bai and Poison Master Hai pushed the door open and walked in. Kneeling on the ground, they began speaking with unwavering resolution in their eyes. "Founder, we have made up our minds. We are willing to undertake this mission. Yuan. Since you have decided to aid me, I won't treat you poorly." Zhongxian nodded, having known already that the other party would make such a choice. He accepted the parts of their souls they had offered before flicking his wrist to whip out the pills and cultivation technique manuals that he had prepared beforehand. As soon as they laid their eyes upon the manuals, the breathing of the duo hastened. As Saint 4 Dan pinnacle experts who had been cultivating poison cultivation techniques ever since they were young, they could tell that despite the simplicity of the secret manual before their eyes, it was directed toward the very essence of the way of poison. If they were to follow the manual, it would be a walk in the park for them to successfully concoct and control a grade 8 poison. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had to achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation first. "Bai Ting, this is the cultivation technique I have specially prepared for you beforehand. It can help you resolve the problem of your blocked Yuanshan acupoint. Cultivate strictly to it, and you will be able to achieve a breakthrough very soon." After saying those words, Zhongxian passed a secret manual over. Without a Saint 4 Dan Heaven's Path divine art, he couldn't impart a cultivation technique to the other party and allow him to achieve a breakthrough immediately. However, through the library of Heaven's Path, he could still analyze the other party's flaws and design a solution to resolving the issue. In simple terms, the secret manual that he had just passed to Poison Master Bai didn't contain a cultivation technique but a treatment method tailored to the other party's condition. As long as the other party cultivated according to the manual, the issue of his sealed Yuanshan acupoint would be resolved. Once that impediment was gone, considering the massive accumulation from cultivating diligently over many years, the other party would be able to achieve an instantaneous breakthrough. After instructing Bai Ting to cultivate it properly, Zhongxian turned to Poison Master Hai and said, "Hai Jinming, execute a fist art." Knowing that the other party was going to offer him personal guidance too, Hai Jinming hurriedly executed a battle technique. A book materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. After studying it carefully, Zhongxian fell into deep contemplation to deduce a feasible solution before imparting it to the other party verbally. As he was facing the duo with his eyes closed, it would be troublesome for him to write it down on paper. Thus, he decided to impart it verbally instead. On the other hand, after hearing the content that Zhongxian was speaking of, Hai Jinming couldn't help but be astonished and impressed at the same time. Just a single fist, and the other party was already able to see through the flaws and problems in his cultivation. In less than an incense's time too, the other party had already tailored a cultivation technique. Most probably, only the founder of the Poison Hall, who had been able to stand toe-to-toe with Kongsha in battle, would be capable of such an incredible feat. Boom! Before the sky even lit up, a resounding buzz echoed in the air. Bai Ting's body jolted, and an immense primordial spirit floated out from his body, bringing radiance to the surroundings. Its presence carried a domineering pressure on those standing before it. Saint 5 Dan, leaving Aperture Realm. Leaving Aperture Realm was the cultivation realm where a cultivator would be able to draw their primordial spirit out through an aperture in their body and roam the world freely. Even if their body were to meet with demise, they would still be able to exist as a primordial spirit. While the cultivator's lifespan would be significantly reduced existing in such a form, it was nevertheless an extremely incredible ability. More importantly, one's primordial spirit would be further aligned with nature and the world, allowing it to draw even greater fighting prowess. Every single cultivator who had reached this level wielded destructive fighting prowess that instilled deference and horror in others. It was also the fundamental requirement to reaching 8-star in most occupations, thus standing among the ranks of the top of the continent. Not too long after Poison Master Bai made a breakthrough, the surrounding spiritual suddenly flurried once more, and Poison Master Hai's primordial spirit broke out from his body as well. After cultivating the method that Zhongxian had tailored specifically for them, they were able to achieve breakthroughs back to back. Retracting their primordial spirits back into their bodies, they walked up to Zhongxian and bowed deeply. At this moment, they were left with nothing but deep respect for the other party. Even 9-star poison masters would be unable to resolve their conditions so easily and allow them to achieve a breakthrough so quickly, but the person before them had actually managed to achieve such a feat. Who else could the other party be other than the founder? All right, stand guard for me outside. Don't allow anyone to interrupt me, and you aren't to peek either. Ignoring the looks of admiration of the duo, Zhongxian waved his hands. Yes. The two poison masters quickly backed out of the room. After which, Zhongxian swiftly set up an isolation barrier to prevent anyone who peering in before putting Wei Ruyan out. After which, he waited patiently for daybreak before removing the formation and indicating for Bai Ting and Hai Jinming to enter. Poison masters. At this moment, even though Zhongxian still looked the same as ever, his cultivation and aura were only at the level of a nascent saint. At the same time, his eyes were also filled with innocence and purity, devoid of the domineering air of a conqueror from before. Knowing that the soul of the founder had already left his body, the duo sighed internally as they clasped their fists to greet the man before them. Yuan. This is her new body. You must make sure to accomplish the mission she has assigned to you, Zhongxian said as he gestured toward Wei Ruyan. Rest assured, we will definitely have it done. Nodding, the duo turned their gazes to Wei Ruyan, and a moment later, their faces reddened in agitation. See, could it be? This young lady possesses the innate poison body? There is no doubt about it. Otherwise, there is no way she would be able to contain the poisonous soul of our ancestor. At this moment, Wei Ruyan's constitution had already been awakened, and she was continuously emanating a poisonous aura. As 7-star pinnacle poison masters, it was natural that they were able to recognize it. They had been thinking that their founder had been forced to choose a random body to contain her soul, but who would have thought that the latter would have actually managed to find an innate poison body? They could already imagine the great heights the Poison Hall could very well be brought to under the leadership of the powerful founder. Gone would be the days where they were forced to hide in the shadows of the world, as if rats scampering on the streets. Founder has said that you should leave this area and head to the Poison Hall headquarters as soon as possible. While her possession was successful, she has fallen into a deep coma as a result of that. She must be treated as soon as possible, and not even the slightest delay is acceptable, Zhongxian instructed grimly. Poison Master Bai nodded. Our purpose here is to obtain a booklet from 2,000 years ago. We have already instructed Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan to fetch it yesterday, so it should be arriving very soon. As soon as we obtain that item, We will leave immediately. Fetching the booklet from the mausoleum of Hall Masters shouldn't take too much effort, so it was unlikely that it would take too long. Booklet? Zhongxian asked with a doubtful look. UN. It is a booklet regarding an ancient domain in Firesource City. There are rumors going around saying that it will open very soon. Thus, the headquarters sent us here to procure it in the hope that we might find something from it, Poison Master Bai said. Even though the founder's soul was no longer in the other party, their souls were still under the other party's control, so they dared not conceal anything from the other party. The booklet is concerning an ancient domain in Firesource City. Could it be the map? Zhongxian's eyes lit up. A while ago, he had heard from a message left behind by the old principal in the Mausoleum of Principles that there was a map of the ancient domain that was in the hands of the Poison Hall. It seemed like these two Poison Masters were here for it as well. With such thoughts in mind, Zhongxian asked, regarding the booklet you are speaking of, can you allow me to take a look at it after you obtain it? I won't even touch the booklet open, if that bothers you. As long as it was a book, the Library of Heaven's Path could replicate it perfectly just by laying his eyes on it. Even touch wasn't required anymore. Of course. Poison Master Bai nodded. The other party was a Poison Master as well, not to mention, he was also the first body that the founder had possessed. Besides, his life was held in the other party's hands. Putting aside taking a look at the booklet, even if the other party wanted to take it away, he wouldn't dare object to it. You have my gratitude. Smiling, Zhongxian was in the midst of his words when the ground abruptly shook violently. A dull rumbling echoed in the distance, as if something had collapsed. What is happening? Alarmed, the trio hurriedly flew out of the room and turned their gazes in the direction that the uproar had come from. Taking a closer look, they noticed that a powerful shockwave had emanated from a mountain not too far away. It seemed like there were two powerful experts clashing with one another. That is the might of a Saint 4 Dan expert, Poison Master Bai remarked with a deep frown. That is, where the mausoleum of Hall Masters is. Quick, let's head over to take a look. The strongest expert in the Hongyuan Empire Poison Hall was Ruo Qingyuan, who only possessed the cultivation of Saint 3 Dan Pinnacle. For the might of a Saint 4 Dan to burst forth in the Poison Hall, it was apparent that something must have happened. And most important of all, the ruckus originated from the mausoleum of Hall Masters. That was where the booklet was stored. Su. With incomparably fast speed, it took merely the blink of an eye for them to arrive at the mausoleum of Hall Masters. At this moment, the entire building had already collapsed. Vice Hall Master Shu and the others were standing not too far away with anxious looks on their faces. What happened? Poison Master Bai asked. Reporting to Poison Master Bai, I am not too sure either. Last night, our Hall Master said that he was going to the mausoleum of Hall Masters to retrieve something, and he instructed us to wait here. But despite waiting for so long, he still hasn't returned yet, Vice Hall Master Shu said with dread. He still hasn't returned yet? There is no doubt about it, something must have happened to him. Let's hurry in to take a look. Frowning, Poison Master Bai rushed into the mausoleum of Hall Masters without any hesitation. Poison Master Hai and Zhongxian followed closely behind. Upon seeing them enter, Vice Hall Master Shu and the others hesitated for a moment before clenching their jaws and following them in as well. According to the rules, the mausoleum of Hall Masters could only be accessed by the incumbent Hall Master of the branch. Despite being esteemed elders, they were unqualified to enter the premises. However, in the face of such a major crisis, they could only forego conventions for the time being. Upon entering, the elders noted that the entire mountain slope was filled with towering and majestic tombs, and the Hall Masters of each generation were buried in each of them. Inscribed on the tombstones in front of the tombs were the outstanding contributions they had made to the Poison Hall. Not too long later, they caught up with Poison Master Bai, Poison Master Hai, and Sun Qiong. At this point, they had already come to a halt. Standing right before a huge depression, the trio had an awful complexion on their faces. Following the gazes of the trio, Vice Hall Master Shu's eyes narrowed in astonishment as his face turned ghastly pale. Hall Master. At the very center of the depression lay Hall Master Ruo Qingyuan, his body crimson with fresh blood. Quickly flying over to help the Ruo Qingyuan up, Vice Hall Master Shu realized that the other party had already stopped breathing. Judging from the other party's injuries, it seemed like he had been killed with a single palm strike. In fact, it seemed like the huge depression in the ground had been caused by the same palm strike. Our Hall Master is dead. The faces of the many elders paled in horror. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.